Open to anyone, all around the world. The Chess.com Global Championship offers the dream of playing against the best.
Whoa!
And hey, have we mentioned there's also $1 million at stake?
The total pot is $1 million.
No, that is not a typo. The prizes are unbelievably generous.
We began with thousands of players. Now only dozens remain.
It's over.
Wow. Ray Robson, he chuckles. He's not happy, but he respects the legend of Ivanchuk, and that legend continues.
The CGC knockout phase has arrived. There are those who played their way in, and some are here thanks to their well-earned reputations. No matter who you are, things are about to get very, very real.
Queen G8 check. Queen G8?
Queen G8,
oh
Queen
my God!
C8.
Oh my God!
A trip to the CGC finals and a clean shot at the largest first place prize of the year. My friends, it's the CGC round of 64. Who will take the next step to Toronto?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Chess.com Global Championship. There were 64 at the start. There are 38 remaining, and there will be 32 left in the tournament after the conclusions of today's bloody affair. Covering it is Grandmaster Aman Hambleton alongside me, Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky. A pleasure to be bringing you another day of action here at the CGC. Aman, welcome to the show. How are you feeling?
Hey, Dania. Hello to everyone watching. I think, not only am I excited for every CGC match, but today's particularly exciting because I think we are about to get into one of most people's favorites for maybe the entire event. And also, we finally get to narrow things down from 64 to 32 players, Dania.
Indeed, and as we go over the overall format, it is a single elimination knockout tournament. If you lose a match, you are out. Each match is 4 games. The time control is 15 minutes plus a 2-second increment per move. And obviously, the first side to get to 2.5 or more wins the match. If the match goes to a 2-2 tie, then we've already had several incredibly tense Armageddons that will decide the outcome of each match. Aman, we have a guy named Hikaru Nakamura who will be participating today. I have a feeling, as we look at the overall bracket here, that might attract a slightly bigger viewership than normal. I don't know why I think that, though.
Yeah, it's a wild prediction there, but while it will certainly likely capture a great percentage of the viewership, I can also say that it captured a great percentage of the votes as well. Like Hikaru, tournament favorite for a lot of people. He's up there at the top of the bracket, as you can see, top left, and he's looking to take out obviously an underdog here in Vasquez, but certainly not someone that anyone should be counting out, Daniel.
No, and you shouldn't be counting him out, even though, yes, we can see the predictions under the player names. It's kind of looking a little bit grim for Grandmaster Vasquez, if you believe those predictions. But we were talking before the show, Rodrigo Vasquez was one of the best blitz players on the Internet Chess Club. He is tremendously experienced. He is no pushover, and his Title Tuesday performances have shown that. So Hikaru is definitely taking this match seriously. And so are the other two favorites, Jeffrey Zhang facing Alexander Bortnyk, one of the most dangerous players in the world, especially in a rapid time control, and Fabi facing the Italian specialist Ukrainian Grandmaster Martin Kravtsev. Aman, I think I speak for everyone when I say we only have 3 matches today, but the quality of those matches, I'd rather have 3 of these matches than 10 of a different kind of match. What do you say to that?
No, 100%. And obviously the favorites in these matches, 3 American players, going to be very familiar for our audiences. But, important to remember that just because these players are underdogs, there's a reason that nobody has a perfect bracket and hasn't had a perfect bracket for a long time, Dania. We see lots of upsets in these pairings. So just because you see those seedings and you see your favorite name there, everything's different when it comes to game day, who's in better shape, and who can ultimately have better nerves if it comes down to Armageddon, right?
And nothing has shown that more than the Group A bracket results. We had Eric Hansen, your boy, defeating Lei Kwang Lim in incredible fashion, surviving a ridiculous roller coaster of wins and losses to survive the Armageddon. Lenier Dominguez avoided an upset. David Navarra, well, you could say that that was an upset, but both of those players are very similar in strength. And now it is up to Hikaru Nakamura to join them. And of course, if Rodrigo Vasquez can pull off the unimaginable, that will be the craziest upset in the entire CGC. So listen, Hikaru Nakamura, he has got an X on his back. And we also want to look at the Group C brackets. So does Wesley So. So do all of the favorites, Aman. They don't have an easy ride because everybody is bringing their A game against them. That always happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see the pairings here. The last spot to fill going into the next round, the round of 32, is that matchup, Jeffrey Zhang and Alexander Bortnyk. Both players extremely active on Chess.com in general. You see them playing and competing in Title Tuesdays and very serious events, rapid chess as well. Bortnyk, so active. So I look at those seeds and they almost don't mean anything to me. Number 3, number 6, both of these guys are extremely competitive. Definitely, I would say that Jeffrey is the favorite, but Bortnyk is just, he's got his systems, he's got his openings that he's really good at, and we'll see if Jeffrey can handle them. I think this is actually shaping up to be potentially one of the closest matchups of this round, so keep an eye on it.
For sure, there's going to be some fascinating games. And finally, we take a quick look at the Group D bracket. You have Vladimir Fedoseev against Garakomsky, the old generation prevailing in that match. Garakomsky will be facing Dmitry Andreikin, but the one match yet to be played, and it will be played in just a couple of minutes, is, of course, Fabiano Caruana, who faces Martin Kravtsov. Aman Kravtsov, maybe a less familiar name to most of our viewers. I've got 2 books that he's written on the Italian on the bookshelf behind me. He's a really, really strong player. He's just like a solid, young, tactical 2650 player. Those guys, they're not pushovers.
No, they're not pushovers, and in fact, it's a really difficult style to play against because they're just fearless. It's probably the best word for them, and that's a tough style when your opponent just isn't scared of what you're going to do. I mean, we all know what a great player Fabiano Caruana is, but I don't think Martin Kravtsov is going into this match thinking that he's too much of an underdog. He's got nothing to lose, and I think all the grandmasters of the world certainly know that he's far from a pushover, quite a strong player, and I don't think Fabi's underestimating him as an opponent.
I don't think he is either, and I don't think, as I said before, that Hikaru Nakamura is underestimating his Chilean opponent, Rodrigo Vasquez. There is quite the age difference. Vasquez, one of the older players in the field at 52 years of age, but his blitz skill has hardly diminished as his Title Tuesday performances have shown, and he might be outrated. He might be the underdog by 98%, but he's a dangerous Najdorf player. His tactical prowess has not waned. It has not diminished. And I'm expecting some very combative games here.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Vasquez, I think, will do well to just make it complicated, tactical. I think going into those slow, grindy positions against Hikaru is never really gonna pan out well for anyone, really. But as you see the players on screen here, I mean, Hikaru is not one to shy away from that challenge, Daniel. He's one of the best tacticians in the world, and I think we might get some really wild positions early on.
Yeah, what makes Hikaru such a dangerous player is that he is a chameleon. He adapts to the surroundings. In this case, he adapts to his opponent, and he tends to choose precisely the kinds of positions that his opponent doesn't like. But I'm still hoping for a Najdorf. I'm hoping that Hikaru launches headfirst into the types of positions that Rodrigo Vasquez has made his career on, has staked his claim on. We're going to see one e4 from Rodrigo Vasquez in his white games. And when Hikaru is playing white, my expectation is he's going to his trusty knight f3 systems, trying to get the position as quiet and as maneuvering style as possible. Right.
No, that's a good point. Hikaru is someone I think we're more familiar with his style, the positions he likes, what openings he goes for. When it comes to Rodrigo Vasquez, definitely people won't be as familiar, but I think as the games progress, you'll start to get a feel how these two players are going to balance out against one another. Hikaru, another thing that I think should be said is he's such a quick player, such an intuitive player, and Vasquez, especially at 52 years of age, not sure how much he's playing online lately, but the interesting thing about him is he really is a seasoned online player. This isn't like, a 50-year-old player who's coming in, like trying to figure out how the computer works.
Chess.com password. What password? Forgot password. I don't know how password.
What? Not the case at all. I can't stress that enough. This is a guy that's literally been playing chess online since like maybe before I even started chess or something.
And before many of the viewers, before many of you watching this were born, he was caster on ICC, and that was a name. Much like Daenerys Targaryen that breathed fire and fear the moment that you were paired with him, the 5-minute pool. And here we go. Seatbelts fastened. Contents may shift throughout the flight. Hikaru Nakamura has the white pieces in game 1. And let's see how well my prediction will age. What will we see on move 1 from the czar of Chess.com? Knight F3 is on the board.
Well called. Knight F3, E3. Yeah, you called these systems that he goes for. It might involve a B3, which he loves to throw in, sometimes even as move number 1. It's a Hikaru specialty, but B3, C4, and maybe not committing that D pawn too quickly and just allowing for a more flexible setup.
And G3 by Hikaru, of course, you can play this system without the double fianchetto, but Hikaru has taken a very particular kind of fondness for this system. I think it started in the RCC. He was playing that exclusively. People were preparing for him, and yet Hikaru just somehow manages to get really good positions out of the system, even though if you turn the engine on, it's just giving zeros everywhere.
Yeah, and that's why it's become a more modern way to approach the shorter time controls, especially as a higher rated player. You just approach the game as like, well, I don't need to get a crazy opening advantage if you're Hikaru in this game. I just need to get a game that hopefully isn't full of a ton of theory that might catch me off guard. And, the better player, theoretically, should just outplay the opponent, just make higher quality moves over the course of a long game. Now, of course, that's theoretical in nature, Dania. It doesn't always play out like that over the board.
Yeah, it doesn't. And in this kind of system, both sides are sort of taking an isolationist approach. E4, it's move 12, and this is the first contact that we have between any of the pieces. And it's not sort of major contact because Black's D5 pawn is the most well-defended pawn on the board. And Castor taking a very ambitious queenside approach, shifting his pawn forward to B5, grabbing space, covering the C4 square. Of course, the downside of that move is that the C6 pawn is weakened, and we do see the move Knight F3 to D4 played pretty frequently in this line. But Aman, I think a lot of people who see this kind of position for the first time are very tempted to play E5. Let's go E5. Let's push the knight back. Closing the center isn't always the best prescription for white in these types of positions, right?
Yeah, no, you said it exactly. And if you take a look at the bishop on H7 for black, it actually starts to get a little more optimistic as soon as the move E5 is played. So E5 actually takes your bishop as white on B2, kind of blocks that diagonal, meanwhile opening up for the bishop on H7. So it's double-edged. Definitely E5 is a serious consideration, and at some point white might go for it. But it's very double-edged, and it's not just like, oh, black is losing time, moving their knight, and it's very bad. No, it's just going to be a different kind of double-edged struggle.
And dare I say, I quite like the way that, I was going to say Castor, that Vasquez is handling the opening. He's accumulating his pieces on the queen side. He's playing very consecutively, and he's basically staying solid. Hikaru trading a pair of knights on E5. So I'm kind of curious how Hikaru plans to unwind in the center and on the king side. He's probably going to continue playing slowly. He might also throw in the move A4, trying to get the queenside pawn structure to kind of dry up, and maybe, I mean, the dream for white, of course, is to secure the C4 square for the knight. But black is not going to move the d pawn in a million years. Never mind.
Right.
Well, I guess he is.
A million years has passed, Daniel. Man, time flies when you're having fun.
It really does. D takes E4. I don't know if I'm in love with that call by Vasquez. What do you think?
So I was about to say, like, now the question is more for Hikaru. If pawn takes, you control that D5 square, yes. But structurally, it's really nice to have the D3, C2, B3 pawns like that. The bishop on H7 is just kind of biting against that D3 pawn, hopefully for the rest of the game if you're Hikaru. And wow, what a decision. I think Hikaru is not interested in playing D takes E4, so much so that he's willing to give up his bishop.
Yeah, after D4, you mentioned it's so important in these positions to judge the activity level of your bishops, and here the bishop would once again be sort of biting on granite. So Hikaru prefers to keep the position open. Now, interestingly, Vasquez decides not to take twice on e4. So he lets the bishop stay alive. The bishop slinks back to g2, and optically, I think it looks like white's better, but black's position is still so incredibly solid. There are no targets. There's a lot of ways to continue activating the pieces. Bishop e7 to c5 to d4, maybe. The knight from f6 could jump into d5. So objectively, the position, remains pretty balanced.
Yeah, I really like your bishop c5 to d4 idea for a few reasons. First of all, bishop takes f6. I don't think you can fully classify that as an issue for black. Let's say bishop takes the knight on f6, pawn takes back. I know it looks weird, but at the same time, opposite bishops, and white doesn't really have a lot to do other than maybe, queen g4 check, a queen h5, but what comes next? Black's pawn gets to f5. Okay, it's very double-edged, but I think black is actually okay with these double pawns. So that part of it, I'm totally okay with. Don't mind the double pawns. The other thing I always remind people is that when you're playing against the two bishops, the best plan in the position, almost close your eyes. You can do this every time. Take whatever bishop you have and trade it for the bishop of the same color. That'll almost always be a very good positional plan. And if black could take the bishop on e7 and white's bishop on e5, take them off the board, that would be a great trade.
Ooh, and I made a4 as a sample move to illustrate the bishop c5 line, and it is on the board. Now, I mentioned this move in the context of trying to carve out the c4 square for a knight. White no longer has any knights, but I think the value of this move still remains. I mean, you're putting some pressure on black's queen side, but yeah, with a c4 square, unoccupied territory, Vasquez says, all right, I'm happy to close the center. I'm happy to close the queen side, rather. And I think this makes the bishop c5, bishop d4 idea, Amon, even more positionally scary for white, given how weak the c3 square is. In the long run, you could consider some sort of a knight maneuver to c3.
Yeah, knight d5, bishop f6 is another pretty natural way to trade the dark square bishops. It looks like he might be going for something similar because if bishop b2, I suspect he's interested in bishop f6, and there's a reason why Hikaru played bishop f4. I think he's trying to really preserve that piece.
Yeah, he's trying to keep his two bishops. The position has stabilized, and they're going to maneuver for the next couple of moves. In the meantime, let's catch the start of the other two games. First and foremost, we have Jeffrey Zhang against Alexander Bortnyk. Jeffrey has the white pieces, and do not be surprised to see a Philidor defense by Bortnyk. He might be one of the only regularly competing GMs on Chess.com to play the Philidor, and his second opening is the Alekhine. So the guy doesn't care what the cool kids play. He has his own stuff, and he knows it pretty damn well.
Exactly. Yeah, he is the cool kids.
Yeah, exactly.
He's got his setups. He knows them so well, as you said, and that's such an interesting style to have, where you're almost daring everyone. You're saying, look, this is what I do. It's fine if you know about it. Go ahead and prepare for me, but I'm preparing my stuff just as well, and I'm ready to take all challengers, because it really is kind of like a theoretical dare when you're playing an opening that isn't top tier and you're playing it routinely. Your opponents should theoretically be able to, drum up some sort of engine line or maybe find the best way to play against it. But credit to Bortnyk, he doesn't care. He's just playing what he knows.
Yeah, he's sort of very, very consistent. He's principled in his own way. And Jeffrey Zhang deploying the dark squared bishop to f4. As far as I remember, this is the sort of recommendation in the most recent books that have been written on 1e4. I think Nagy recommended in his well-known series. Bortnyk immediately responds with knight c6, challenging the knight on d4. And the one thing you don't want to do automatically here, Amon, I think you'll co-sign this, is you don't automatically want to take on c6. The problem with this is that it opens the b file, and this pawn mass in the center is actually really, really hard to deal with if you white, even though visually black's pawn structure is damaged.
Yeah, and once the rook comes to b8, you start to feel that with that bishop out on f4, it's like, okay, that b2 pawn's a little annoying. You play b3, and the knight on c3 is a little bit loose. So it makes more sense, bishop b5, and after bishop d7, white has the option to just leave things as they are, or to maybe take on c6 with the bishop instead. So you still have the flexibility of the knight in the center.
And generally, bishop f4 insinuates that you want to castle queenside, but white is under no obligation to follow through on that. You can very well castle kingside here if you prefer. And another idea that you sometimes see is an early e5 pawn push. And if you can force black to play d takes e5 and b takes c6, then the queenside pawn structure really starts to look like an eyesore.
Yeah. And after, let's say, b takes c6, e5.
I don't even have to make any moves
options
on the board, Amon.
Yeah, exactly. There's the idea.
They're making them for me.
Knight,
there it is.
I mean, of course, pawn takes e5, but knight d5 is the way to try to keep the d pawn on d6. But while we were maybe worried about getting isolated c pawns, after a move like knight d5, knight takes d5, pawn takes d5, you just take on d6, and all of a sudden, you've got the same doubled pawns. They're just over on the d file now.
This is a nasty situation. White would castle, and Anatoly Karpov would slay 5 dragons to get a position like this. So would someone like Jose Raul Capablanca. This is the nightmare scenario for Black. Yeah. Bortnyk, for that reason, he captures on e5 and he castles, and so he is saddled with this sort of this weak pawn mass on the queen side. On the other hand, the center has opened up, and just like the Hikaru game, Black is the one with the bishop pair. So I think you shouldn't be fooled by the relative sort of, it appears that Black's position is passive, but with the center being as open as it is, things can change here at the drop of a hat, Amon.
Yeah, the pieces can get out so quickly, whether it's c5, bishop c6, whether it's bishop g4, rook b8, rook e8 as you're highlighting. Like, the pieces can really flow into the game easily. For White, of course, you've got the 2 open files in the center you want to bring the rooks to, but the bishops, I think, are going to do a good job pressuring this position. And I think that's why we can see the eval bar hovering around 0.00 right now.
Yeah, we are going to keep an eye on this middle game as it unfolds. And the other game that we haven't looked at yet is, of course, Fabiano Caruana's duel against Martin Kravtsev. Fabi with the white pieces in game 1. And this smacks of a Queen's Gambit declined, and one in which White has already given up his dark squared bishop. Amon, in all 3 games right now, one of the sides has the bishop pair. Kind of interesting.
Yeah, and that's probably the most iconic imbalance in chess. The bishop pair. Everyone touts the bishop pair. Obviously, it's great to have, but it's not just like a guarantee. The bishop pair is not better in every single position, and that's why we've seen, for example, here with the white pieces, Fabiano Caruana, he's actually given up his bishop on g3, played h takes g3, and what does he have instead? He has a big lead in development, open h file, and the option maybe to play for e4 in the center.
Yeah, the option to play for e4 later down the line, maybe g4, g5, using the pawn as a battering ram, especially if Black wants to castle kingside. Yeah. And Fabi continues with the move knight c3 to e2. Well, I wonder where he's going with that knight. There's a lot of possible destinations.
Yeah, keep an eye on that knight. We'll keep you updated where it ends up. The weird thing about knight e2 is that, let's say I take any piece, queen, bishop, and if I just give you a check on that diagonal, I'm kind of asking you, okay, wait a minute, how are you even blocking this check, Daniel?
Yeah, if we pull up an analysis board, this is kind of a fascinating situation. My inclination would be to play king f1 here. I think having said A, you have to say B. The one thing I don't want to do is offer a queen trade with queen c3 that walks into bishop b4. Maybe queen d2, but after king f1, I think it's, I think White will get the knight to f4, and then you could make the case that ultimately the king is going to park itself on e2, and with the center being as closed as it is, optically this looks a little bit ugly, but I think White can probably get away with this. I'm not in love with White's position, though, by any means. Make no mistake.
Yeah, king f1 is not a natural move, but if Fabi is, let's say ahead on time, comfortable with this position, playing a la tempo, and he's just gone knight e2, then I feel like it's... Yeah, exactly. I feel like he's comfortable with it, Daniel.
Knight f2 a la tempo. Yes.
I mean, I think if you just say a la tempo, then everyone has to respect whatever you just said.
Or on tap.
Yeah.
It's funny
when it's a very American way,
on tap. It is. Although when I spend, can you tell me what beers you have on tap here in this establishment? Or Heineken. But when we are going to switch back to Hikaru's game, and it appears, Amon, that Hikaru has not managed to squeeze the most out of his bishop pair. They are in an endgame, and it looks like the first game is going to end in a draw.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to end in a draw, but make no mistake, it's one of these draws where you pat yourself on the back if you're Rodrigo, because of course it's equal. But I got to be honest, I like the knight. Like if I want to take either side of this position, I'll take the knight. It's relatively closed off. Bishop doesn't have a lot of targets, so I think Hikaru will get a draw here. But let's say the colors were flipped for a moment, Dania. Wouldn't you expect Hikaru to take this position with black and, well, certainly beat me with it, but push for an advantage?
I was literally opening my mouth to say that. I think when I said the game would end in a draw, it's because Hikaru is playing with the white pieces.
Yep.
But Vasquez is kind of making me eat my words. Look at that knight. Now,
Love
it was sitting on b6 or wherever, deep dark corner it was banished to, and all of a sudden, it's reaching f5, and guess where it can go to from f5? It can go to d4. White's got this terribly weak pawn on c2. And here's one of the problems that White is facing. If you go, let's say, rook e2, knight f5, this threatens a fork. I don't know, you play rook d2. Now, the rook is banished to a passive square. Black can shift the rook to e7 and potentially prepare the move e5. So I actually feel like if Rodrigo Vasquez is willing to take some risk, and there isn't even that much risk that you're taking, White has no way to make progress. He's got a serious shot of winning this game, Aman. This might be the best chance he's going to get the entire match.
Exactly. About to say those exact words. If you don't take your chance here, then where do you think your chances are going to lie?
Why did he take 2 seconds in this position?
Well, he's got 11 minutes, right? He should be thinking about knight d5.
Knight d5 at least has to be calculated, no?
Yeah.
This might win the game because after bishop takes d5, I think you just play e takes d5, Aman.
Yeah.
And rook b7 resigns because d4 is coming. You're going to lose all of your queenside pawns. What the heck?
Yeah, that's actually, this would be resignation. I don't think Hikaru would take that knight. But if you don't take the knight, I mean, the pawn's just defended, right? And okay, there's still some work to be done. But no, this looks like a miss by Rodrigo. And also, I have to say, shaky start for Hikaru. Clearly, he's been outplayed here by his opponent. He's, I think within more of a draw territory now than a couple moves ago. Dodged a bullet, but tons of time on the clock for Rodrigo. He should play this.
But I just can't get over the fact that, not to be sort of a, armchair general here, but c3 was a blunder by Hikaru. You could see the eval bar at +4.
Yeah.
Not an exaggeration. And when an opponent plays a move like c3, which is as committal as this move is, and you've got as much time as Rodrigo Vasquez does, you have to, it's incumbent on you to spend a little bit more time calculating the obvious move. I think there was a little bit of trust that was happening there. What do you think? A
little bit of trust, but also it's like, again, if Hikaru was with the black pieces, this game would probably be over right now. Like, if White played
some people
C3,
would resign this.
Exactly. If White played c3 against Hikaru, he would look at that move and be like, wait a minute, c3, that's a little bit too much. White's trying too much here. Knight d5 and take advantage of it. So it does take some experience, I think, grinding out these positions. And honestly, this might be a situation where Hikaru gets a draw because he's Hikaru, and he should be very happy with that result here. Probably an opportunity missed for Rodrigo. Obviously, draws a great result, but it's a long match, and ultimately, if you're gonna, knock out Hikaru from the tournament, you do have to win a game, whether it's an Armageddon or not.
Yeah, sometimes people fall into the trap of, as you said, patting themselves on the back for a draw. This is a great result, especially with the black pieces. But like you're saying, Hikaru has 3 more games. The match is still tied, right? It's not like a draw is a moral victory, but it doesn't necessarily advance your cause in the match all that much. I think when Vasquez is going to be looking at this game, maybe before the second game begins, maybe after the match, he is going to be kicking himself because they win with the black pieces in game 1. That basically puts Hikaru's back against the wall right away, Aman.
For sure. So I think it's appropriate to be critical here, Dania, because this is a knockout tournament, and I think, one of the favorites to maybe win the entire thing is not going to give you an opportunity with the black pieces to, convert that type of advantage too often. Like, that's going to be few and far between. So good result there, but could have been more. I wonder if he's going to be thinking about that in the oncoming games as we switch over to the game, which is still in progress and is still very balanced here between Bortnyk and Jeffrey.
And I think we see just in the kind of endgame that they have gotten, the extent to which Bortnyk understands these Philidor positions. essentially notes the only sign that his queenside pawn structure at one point was totally ruined is the fact that a7 is isolated. But then the e3 pawn is isolated. We have a bishop against the knight situation. I agree. I think the position is totally balanced here. I would say probably a 75% or higher chance of a draw here. One of those situations where, like, I don't know exactly the way that this endgame is going to go, but I get the sense that it's going to remain balanced unless one of the sides blunders.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, like, white definitely has an idea of maybe king f2. Let's just say knight e4 happens, and white trades the knights, right? Then I think white can start to get a little optimistic about playing knight versus bishop, because I think the knight always has a good chance to outplay the bishop in those cases. But other than that, it's tough to find real imbalances here, Dania, and I agree 100%. I think we're headed for a draw on this one as well.
Yeah, but you made an instructive point there before we switch to the Fabi game. Okay, white plays h3, so he takes the game in a different direction. But white's biggest hope here is to use the knights as weapons to attack this queen side. So, for example, if we pull up an analysis board here just to show how this could possibly go wrong for black, let's say the bishop drops back to f5. The knight moves into d4, attacking c6, attacking f5, forcing the bishop back. Then maybe you play the move b4 in order to prevent c5 and fix the weakness on c6. Eventually, later down the line, you can play knight a4, knight c5. So what I'm not trying to suggest is that the game is over and that there is no hope for either side. If I would have to choose a side, I would probably still take white, but just by a little smidge.
Yeah, and actually Jeffrey has gone for something a little bit different, which is encouraged the bishop to trade for the knight on f3 with h3. So he's kind of provoked it, and then we saw this move d4, taking advantage of the pin on the e-file by Bortnyk, and I think this should just be good liquidation, as now you see that look, that grandmaster look, right up to the ceiling. It's like, where are the answers to my current dilemma, which is, if knight takes pawn, what do you make of that endgame? Imagine all the pieces disappear.
I hate those situations where you have to evaluate some sort of amorphous pawn endgame where both sides have pawn majorities on either flank, and all three results are possible. The fact of the matter is that in this pawn endgame, the rules of engagement are different. When you have two pawns that are one file away from each other, in a rook endgame, these are weaknesses. In a pawn endgame, this is often the best arrangement you could ask for because it makes it as difficult as possible for black to create a passed pawn. Black is the same thing on the queen side. It's anybody's game.
Yeah, and I think there's a reason that the eval bar is always going to hang out around the center of the board here. But make no mistake, it's so easy to lose a king and pawn endgame. One wrong move. The engine, it's seen it the whole way through, right? They're not concerned at all. But I think that this could be lost by either player, honestly. They're not careful.
Yeah, and I just made a sample move, h5. Totally natural. Let's start pushing the pawns. Apparently, after b4, white's already winning. It's +5. So it's really as easy as that to lose an endgame like this. And I think for that reason, Bortnyk, it's game one. You really don't want to lose. And he decides to keep the pieces on the board. I think that's a prudent call. I think that greatly increases the probability that this game ends in relatively uneventful draw. Okay, we'll leave the players to contest this complex but ultimately balanced endgame, and we will check out our final game. Fabiano Caruana has just a little bit of a time advantage here.
He has a bit of a time advantage. One thing you could say about the position, I'm a little focused on these tripled pawns. It's not too often in chess that you see, first of all, tripled pawns. But I got to be honest, tripled pawns where there's also still a supporting pawn, so not isolated pawns, because when you think of how you get tripled pawns, it would be the two pawns on either side joining the same file. So then it means you've had even another exchange to bring a pawn closer. That's pretty rare.
Yeah, the pawn, I guess, how did the pawn get to f4? Well, the pawn from g2 went to f3. Oh, the pawn from h2 went to g3, as you're saying.
Exactly.
That is actually rare. Collectors of rare chess situations should open their catalog and put another entry in. But speaking of putting an entry in, Fabiano Caruana about to make an entry into h7 with his queen, and there's no way that black can stop him. I mean, if you play queen g6, you drop a pawn in the endgame. Despite these tripled pawns, white can still ultimately use these pawns, Aman, in order to crash through on the king side with an eventual g4, g5. Black's situation is pretty dire here.
Yeah, you want to have that knight already on the f8 square. Knight on f8, and there is no bait. That's not the case, and so there's only one option, Daniel. You can't just give up material. You got to run.
Got to run with your own 2 legs, and that is exactly what Kravtsov does. Now, the big question, will Fabiano still infiltrate h7? There's our answer. Now, the threat here is rook e1, and that will set up essentially unstoppable mate on h8. How does Kravtsov deal with that?
Yeah, because if you go queen f6, rook e1, knight e6, there's this like f5 idea, right? And you want to kick the knight.
Let's pull up an analysis board here. This is interesting. If rook e1, what you're saying is knight e6 loses to f5, and if you move your knight, you get checkmated on h8 because e7 is protected. So I guess after rook e1, the only move seems to be rook takes e1. Sounds totally counterintuitive. Why give up the e-file? But now black has this defensive resource, g5. And somehow the balance is kept by this queen, which is a hero.
Amazing.
Whoa, it's on the board. He's found it.
Everything that we just said is on the board. And honestly, g5 is a total shock move because, you can see Fabi's face. He's kind of leaning in, and he knows that he's definitely missed something there. And with time ticking down, that's a head shake from Fabiano and an opportunity for Martin Kravtsov to get back in this game.
And you can see the consternation, the frustration there for Fabi. Maybe he only saw g6, which is, 99% of cases the way that you do this. But this drops the h6 pawn, and here white is more than chilling. But after g5, the knight is coming into e6. Let's not forget, Aman, that the d4 pawn is a huge target. So if black can repel the attack, we could be talking about black taking over the initiative pretty darn soon.
I'm going to go ahead and put myself out there and say we are talking about that, Dania. I think we're already there. Fabi is definitely in like kind of recovery mode. Yes, you can take on g5, but it doesn't appear that there's a way to make progress because the queen on f6 covers everything. h6, h8. There are no checks that white can use. So it's like, yeah, you've gotten into h7, but where are you going next? And you're calling it, whether it's rook e8 by black, knight e6. I mean, just liquidate the pieces and white's pawns are going to start falling apart.
And the other thing that is that if white would have played f5, the knight can actually access d4 through b5. You can fly through London Heathrow as well as Frankfurt. So Fabi, I think he's recovered well. He plays the move rook h1. He still has that 6-minute time advantage. So if you can keep the queens on the board, if you can keep the position relatively complex, I think that the clock might play a role here. We'll see.
Absolutely. Rook h1 feels like a nice move to keep things going. The interesting thing is that, let's say the d pawn falls and the h pawn falls, black wouldn't be too upset about that, as long as you can maybe trade the queens. So if you play something like, I don't know, knight e6, let's say, rook takes h6 and queen g7, then I think what's maybe interesting is this move queen h8, which is not on everyone's radar because you think queen g7, okay, he's kind of got it covered. Queen h8, you definitely can't take it without losing your rook, and then, yeah, you fall victim to this
beautiful rook takes
tactic.
e6. But not queen takes a8 because then black recaptures the rook on h6.
Exactly.
So there's still a lot of potential to blunder is what you're saying. And if you try to beat white to the punch with the move queen g7, well, it still doesn't entirely solve all of the problems. Maybe this is the best way to effectuate the queen trade. But if you just blindly take on h7, you just end up losing a bunch of pawns here.
That's right.
And, bishop g6 becomes a problem. So Kravtsov now with 1 minute on the clock. I think one thing, Aman, that's not talked about enough is the way the top players recover from blunders, right? They almost never, when they blunder, a lot of players just immediately collapse. Top players just immediately find a good follow-up move, which I think is exactly what Fabi has managed to do. But Kravtsov, he stays sharp, and he keeps the knight on c7 so that it protects the rook on a8, taking the sting out of queen h8 check.
Yeah, that's a huge detail. Rook takes h6. Now black can just move the queen maybe to g7 again. And queen h8, you're happy to trade the queens, play king g7, king e7. And the funny thing about that pawn on f4, as black, you don't care. White can have that pawn in any endgame. It's like, okay, you want tripled isolated pawns? Notice how the knight against the bishop in any endgame can just go to e6. and there's not a thing that white can do to stop the knight from taking every single pawn on a dark square.
Yeah, that's like Pac-Man, except there's no bad guy because the pawns are on a dark square. No, this is concerning for Fabian. I love the fact that Kravtsov actually took a minute to play G takes F4. He didn't panic. He realized that finding the correct move in this position is a lot more important than preserving X amount of time. So it is a 3-result game. I think if Fabi wins this, it will be because of the clock. But can he find a way to keep some meat on the bone here, to keep the queens on the board and to keep the position complicated? I don't see anything off the top of my head.
And the weirdest part is that after rook takes h6, it's a forced queen trade after queen g7. It's not just like, oh, black's trying to trade the queens. It's, the queens are coming off the board now. That's exactly what black wants.
It's crazy. And just to reiterate, queen h8 check, which previously ended up winning the rook. Here, the knight's going to move into a8. It's a bad knight, but it's only going to take it 2 moves to move back to the promised land, either through d5 or through e6. And once the d4 pawn is lost, once it's sacked, black will have a 4-on-2 on the king side. This could just end up being totally lost for white.
And if you want to even continue from this position, and I would love to just put takes on f4 on the board, knight c7, king d2, knight d6, king e3, and let's just play a move like a5 for black, bishop f5, king f6, and bishop takes knight. And you just get this really sweet visual of a king and pawn endgame where I think this is like the reminder of why double isolated or now triple isolated pawns absolutely are terrible. And you can probably show just how white is going to be zugzwanged here, and they're going to lose every single pawn in succession.
Yeah. And you're going to
so
end up being down 3 pawns. Fabi, after a hefty think there, does end up playing rook takes h6. Okay, now Kravtsov has to play queen g7. He's got to do it quickly. Yeah. To be honest, I'm not even thinking about playing queen takes d4 here. I am not tempting fate, and neither does the Ukrainian Grandmaster. He has managed to steer the game into an endgame. He's better. He's flat out better in this position.
Yeah, and better is a term that I don't think Martin would use for his position if the queens were on the board. Maybe he's up a pawn, or maybe he's doing well, but with the queens there and the time low, you start to get a little shaky. But knowing 100% that those queens are disappearing from the board right now, you really start to become comfortable, get optimistic, and remind yourself that, hey, I've got an advantage, and I'm not at risk of getting mated, or there's not going to be any big tactics. The only thing that might happen is just me failing to convert at this point.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. Well, the situation has more or less stabilized. We can take this opportunity to quickly update you on our other remaining game between Jeffrey and Bortnyk. Now, earlier on this endgame, Bortnyk offered a draw, which Jeffrey Zhang declined. Is he regretting that right about now? He's still down a pawn, and I feel like he's got compensation in the form of black's weak queenside pawns, but it could evaporate if black consolidates his pieces.
So you're saying there was a draw offer?
Bortnyk offered a draw, and Jeffrey declined it a little bit earlier.
Very interesting. Yeah, because, I mean, the rook, obviously, for black is a little bit suspiciously placed. The knight on e3, you can see, does this beautiful job along with the pawn on f4. It just takes every single square, g5, f5, e5, d5. So the rook on h5 doesn't have a lot of squares, and I believe that that's why the eval bar is like anywhere close to 0.00. Otherwise, this has been a tremendous achievement for Bortnyk in this game so far. Like, if he could get something like knight to d5, right, and you'd like maybe trade those knights off the board, definitely start to get optimistic about an endgame up a pawn.
Yeah, it seems that knight d5 is the safe option. And it is only by the skin of his teeth. It is only on the strength of the fact that the 2-on-3 is basically a dead draw. Again, I mentioned that in the pawn endgame, this pawn arrangement is ideal. In the rook endgame, it is as well, because, again, it prevents the side of the pawn majority from easily creating a passer. Here, black can play a5. And according to the engine, white doesn't even have to play rook a6 here, which would lead potentially to a 2-on-3, which Jeffrey should still be able to draw. It appears that white can just bide his time with king g4, And the bottom line is that the rook is tied down to d5. It can never move away. And if it does move away, white takes on c5, simultaneously defending c2. So it's kind of a positional draw just because black can make no progress.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah, that's, it looks like knight d5. Trade those tricky knights off.
He's played it.
Get the end game. Like, it's hard not to play that move because your rook is so trapped on h5. But if you're Bortnyk, this is a great success. You had a tremendous opening success, I think.
Great
no
success.
Danger at all. And, look at this. You're drawing and maybe even pushing if Jeffrey misplays.
Yeah, Jeffrey's got 90 seconds. And when you're in time pressure, this approach of just not doing anything, just by definition doing nothing, is difficult.
Yeah,
and making the determination that your opponent has no way to make progress, it's a lot easier said than done. So I think if you get a 2-on-3, Bortnyk just has ways. I think we've talked about this before. Bortnyk is an absolute magician when it comes to pulling out drawn endgames. Like, he has basically won rook versus rook on the board. He's like the most interesting man in the world. He has won the rook versus rook endgame many times, but over the board rather than on the clock,
Yep. No, exactly. Credit to both players. Yeah, Sekis. Credit to both players, honestly, finding what I think is the correct line. But this is the moment, right? This is what is going to tell us whether or not Jeffrey understands that he should do nothing.
For some reason, I'm having some sort of deja vu where I feel like I've seen this game before it happened, and I feel like Jeffrey's about to blunder something, but man, Jeffrey is such a great defender here. He's got 34 seconds, but that 2-second increment is absolutely vital in situations like this. He's gone rook a6, though.
Yeah, rook d2, c4 might be the intention.
Oh, and maybe Bortnyk himself should go c4.
Right.
With the idea of playing bc rook c5 and just chomping on the remaining c-pawns.
Yep. At least you're giving yourself a chance here with the black pieces to actually enjoy that extra pawn. It is going to be a draw, 2 against 3 on the king side, but anything can happen, as you said, time getting low, and at least give yourself a chance.
Yeah, I've seen the prevailing side actually win, or the side with the extra pawn win these types of 2-on-3 endgames a lot, especially when one side has, let's say, 10 seconds, you're playing on increment. You've got to make judgment calls really, really quickly. That's exactly what I was saying. Bortnyk knows how to put his opponent in a situation where he has to make some sort of a decision, and he's got to do it quickly. 15 seconds now for Jeffrey Zhang, and this is a case in point. The rook is getting to a3, and now the king on h4 is a little bit precarious.
Because now the c-pawn, if it falls, the f4 pawn falls with check, right? So there's just some things down the line that you don't always foresee.
I think it might be time for rook a3. The king has entered a path of no return. It can't drop back to g3 because then you'll end up giving the b3 pawn away with check as well.
So I think there might be something weird that happens where the black rook gets to b3 and the white king is in this weird spot. So black might play pawn h5 if king g4. Then the king's stuck on h4. And later black might play rook f3 to go win that f4 pawn by force. So this actually is starting to look very suspicious for white.
There's some checkmating ideas that are also not entirely out of the question. By the way, Fabiano Caruana's game is also entering the time scramble phase. I don't know which game to turn to as Bortnyk ponders his next move. Okay, let's quickly check into the Fabiano Caruana game.
Yeah,
it's the best situation to have. We have 2 fascinating games. Martin Kravtsov continues to push this endgame advantage. Now, Fabi himself is down to 30 seconds.
Yeah, and I don't know how it got into so much chaos here, but this is incredibly interesting with knight e4 coming, and then d3 is going to be a killer move.
Oh, it is, because bishop takes d3, loses the bishop to rook d2. Great spot by you. Fabi's pawns are so far back, they're way too far back. But he walked into it.
Yeah, now you got to play like king e1 or something, but
rook f3.
Yeah, you can just dislodge this bishop, and Fabi is at serious risk of losing this game.
This has been a game of doubled and tripled pawns. And again, much like white's tripled pawns earlier, the doubled pawns are a strength because if the bishop gives itself up for one of them, you're going to have the other one to promote. Here comes the king.
Knight d2 if rook b3.
Oh, or knight c5.
Or knight c5, sorry.
I think it's over. d3 is coming.
Amazing. He has to take, but this is, dead on the spot. Pawn takes d3, and Fabi knows it's over.
d2? Or rook f1 and d2. It's
Amazing.
all over.
Wow, what a result. Unbelievable. I mean, the way that he stayed in there as that game finishes. We jump back to our live game here, but Dania still reeling at the end of that is going to be Fabiano. And are we going to see the same thing over here? Another rook endgame win?
Jeffrey's resigned. Bortnyk has managed to win it.
The fist pump at the end, that means a lot to him, especially we were looking at that eval bar, 0.00. The engine was screaming, but you and I weren't convinced, trying to remind everybody that no, time plays a factor, and you mentioned it. Who is one of the absolute best at squeezing something from nothing? Alexander Bortnyk.
And you called it. He won the f4 pawn. He got Jeffrey's king boxed in. And we look at the results from round one. What an eventful start to today's action. A draw by Rodrigo Vasquez. Fabiano Caruana loses his first white game against Kravtsev. And Alexander Bortnyk also wins with the black pieces. So upsets all around.
Wow.
This bodes well for the rest of the action. We've got some comebacks to see. And Hikaru Nakamura, he was worse basically the entire game. So he's going to have to step up his game as well. We're going to have to step up our coffee game because we're going to go on a very short break, ladies and gentlemen. And when we come back, we are going to get the second game of this amazing day of action here at the Chess.com Global Championship. Stay tuned. The 2022-23 Collegiate Chess League, in partnership with the NACE Star League, begins Saturday, September 24th. Sign-ups close on Saturday for the 24th. For students, make sure to sign up at go.chess.com/CCL to represent your school in the Premier Chess League for college students. Don't forget the Collegiate Chess League coming your way very soon. Well, what else is coming your way very soon? Game 2 of the CGC here with Grandmaster Amon Hamilton. Amon, we had surprises all around in Game 1.
Yeah, we absolutely did, Danya. And I think going into this, look, the Americans were all favorites coming in. But what we saw was great positions and then slowly getting outplayed by their opponents. We saw Martin Kravtsev take a tough position where Fabiano was honestly dominating from the opening. He was down on time. Everything looked tough for him. But he recovered, got a queen trade, and ultimately didn't just equalize after that. He took it home for the full point against Fabiano. And now the Americans on the back foot. Hikaru, I think, happy to escape with a draw. Could have been a loss in his first game. And Bortnyk squeezing, water from stone and coming with a win as well. So we've seen upsets to start things off on every board. Very excited for Game 2.
Yeah, me too. I mean, there's nothing worse in a CGC match than losing Game 1. I mentioned on a previous broadcast that it's easy to fall into the trap of assuming that I've got 4 games, I've got 3 more games to come back with. Most of these players almost never lose with white. So in Game 2, you basically have to win. We haven't had any players surmounting a 2-0 deficit yet. So for Fabiano Caruana and Jeffrey Zhang, it is mission critical to, at the very least, stabilize the situation with the draw.
Yeah, no, you said it best. I think that in Hikaru's case, things are not as dire, let's say, as the other matches. Of course, the other players on the back foot. It means that they are now required to win to get back into this match. But I think we were critical of Rodrigo as we see the game on our screen now, getting into game number 2. We were critical that he didn't push for more, Danya, because that opportunity against a guy as good as Hikaru is not going to happen too often. So very curious to see how Rodrigo bounces back with the white pieces now. Is he looking to push, or do you think he's just, interested in maybe stabilizing this match?
I mean, it's hard to say. I think the question depends on whether Rodrigo reviewed that game during the break. I think if he did and he discovered that he could play b takes e3, he's going to be angry. During these matches, ignorance generally is bliss. If he didn't review it, then he might be pretty happy with his result, and maybe then he'll play a little bit more solidly. Now, what surprises me is his opening choice. You would almost think that Hikaru is playing white here because he's channeling a type of Hikaru opening. He's played 1d4, and he's taking the game into very sort of placid positional channels.
Yeah, I was going to say takes, and actually d5 is sort of the theory for black to play. So pawn to d5, but Hikaru likely just doesn't want to tread into those waters. And the reason why d6 that Hikaru's played is not actually one of the top tier moves is because of exactly what Rodrigo played, d5. I have played this position so many times just in quick chess, blitz, or bullet as black, and you can really get a good game, I think, if white does not punish. So if white just slowly plays b3, h3, rook e1, queen e2, just whatever moves, I think black gets a great game together. But what has happened to me so many times, Danya, is just quick execution. I'm talking about knight h4, f4, immediately sinking pieces into the f5 square. And I think if you go for the throat in this kind of game, it works out really well.
And I think that's exactly what Rodrigo Vasquez is doing. He's gone not knight h4, but knight g5. So I think the idea is twofold. The main concept here is f2, f4, getting rid of the linchpin in black structure, the e5 pawn. But the secondary idea is to meet the move h6 with knight g to e4 and just have a nice, whichever piece ends up on e4, whether it's a nice knight or a bishop. If you can remove this knight from f6, you also get the possibility of dragging a queen to h5. And in the event that black castle's kingside, that could get really scary really, really quickly. And so Hikaru making sure to stabilize the knight on f6. But here comes f4.
Yep. f4 happens. Now, black's knight on d7 is ready, right? It's going to jump into e5. It wants to capture back. if that happens. But it's all about open lines for the white pieces. White's not thinking positionally, oh, black gets the great e5 outpost. No, none of that matters. It's about going for the king, going for the throat, and if Hikaru castles kingside, there's going to be something happening on either f7 or h7.
Yeah, this is unpleasant. I mean, the EVL bar is showing +1, but I think we can see why. It's not one of those mysterious +1s. The bishop on b7 is also not helping black's cause. I mean, it's nowhere near being active. b5 is not in the cards at the present moment. Rodrigo Vasquez he's adopting the exact style that you need to adopt to score a historic upset, right? He is not holding any punches, and he is taking it to Hikaru with both colors in the opening.
He has. I think he's playing in his style, great style. Tough for Hikaru to meet, because I think Hikaru played d6 early on here and was kind of thinking to himself, okay, I'm not going to play the main stuff, d5, very explored territory. I'm going to play this slightly worse system, and if my opponent doesn't know, like, surefire how to punish it, I might get a great game. But it always feels like you're rolling the dice a little bit, because if they do know, then suddenly you're in Hikaru's situation right now, where you're down on the clock and you're kind of on the back foot, which is not a pleasant place to be.
It is not, and the knight is choosing which place it wants to be. You've got knight f3, which would pressure black to take on f4, which generally is in white's favor, but I think the initial idea was to drag this knight back to e4. Vasquez chooses knight f3. I was going to say I actually prefer knight e4. I can't exactly put my finger on why. I feel like it's a little bit more zesty. It's a little bit more active. But knight f3 by Vasquez, and it seems to me that Hikaru is not actually forced to take on f4. I think he's likely to castle here.
One of the reasons why I like knight e4 was now that the move h6 has been played, I think black is not incentivized to play the move g6. Now, the h6 pawn will be weak, and g6 is also just a more tender square now. So I wanted knight e4 to maybe slide back to g3 for knight h5 or knight f5. And from f3, I think, okay, maybe knight h4 to f5 is still an idea, but I think it's a little more solid to have played your knight to g3, because it's just a sturdier square. Knight h4 can be a bit loose with the bishop on e7.
I agree with you. I'm not the biggest fan of how Vasquez is handling this early middle game. Now I feel like rook e8 would set up an x-ray against the queen, but no question that Rodrigo Vasquez the opening has been an unabashed success for him. In the meantime, the other two games have begun, so let's check into the first moves of Alexander Bortnyk against Jeffrey Zhang. You've got an anti-Berlin here that's transposed now into a 4 knights variation. Well, Jeffrey, I think he's going to try to equalize the score in this game. I don't think Jeffrey is the kind of guy who's going to try to play solidly and then, try to win with white in the next game. I think he's going to try to equalize it here and now.
So not in the Russian school of chess, right? What is it?
No.
Always make a draw after a loss?
Yeah, I'll make a draw solid, and win this white. Okay, Berlin by Jeffrey, but I think he knew that Alexander Bortnyk is not just going to surrender the white pieces with a Berlin draw.
Right. So actually what we see here, and it's important to point out that the wins, all the games in the last round were actually the underdogs with the black pieces. So all those great results we saw, that's what the black pieces. It might not make the biggest difference, but believe me, at the highest level, the white pieces versus the black pieces in terms of playing for a win, if you need on demand, it does matter.
Oh, it matters tremendously. And it's interesting, actually, that Bortnyk did have the possibility of taking a Berlin draw here, decided not to. A pretty bold call. I think Bortnyk, from his perspective, wants to win a second game and basically finish this match right now. And that's a golden opportunity.
Is that what you like, Danny? Is that your style? Or would you be more of a, up 1 point, take my Berlin draw kind of guy?
With white, I would probably take the Berlin draw. With black, I probably wouldn't play the Berlin to begin with. I'd be too afraid of my opponent, because it would give me a lot of anxiety to know that I had essentially given up one more game and I had not even attempted to quash the deficit. So anyways, we're past that. Bortnyk decides to castle kingside, and it's not every day that you see white putting a knight on c3 in the Ruy Lopez, so this gives the position a slightly more unconventional, slightly more traditional 4 knights kind of flavor, right?
Yeah, the interesting thing about this is, bishop g5, knight d5. I don't know about you, Dania, but that was my go-to when I was a kid.
Oh,
Used to win so many games, whether it was the Italian, Ruy Lopez, doesn't matter. I guess the flexibility for black here is the d pawn, right? It hasn't committed itself to d6 yet, and sometimes when white plays bishop g5, black can even, in some cases, go back to e7, depending on what white wants to do, and we will see rook e8 to watch over that e5 pawn, which I feel like some players always forget to do that. They're like, oh yeah, this is the Ruy Lopez. I can just hang my e-pawn for 20 moves.
Yeah,
and, at some point.
Yeah. At some point, he's going to take on e5. On the previous move, it should be pointed out that if white did this here, there's the classic idea, queen d4, forking the knight and the bishop. White actually can save the piece here with bishop e3 and d4, but nonetheless, black solves all of the opening problems. So anyways, the position has stabilized. We're only 6 moves in. Let us check in on the other game, which is Kravtsev against Caruana. And here, Martin Kravtsev deviating from his usual e4. So we see Vasquez playing an uncharacteristic d4, and Martin Kravtsev playing one knight f3, also kind of trying to steer the game into relatively non-theoretical waters, although that doesn't really exist anymore, Amon. The waters are all theoretical everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Have you seen the waters lately?
they're totally theoretical. I have.
I wonder
there's
about
nothing.
b4 in this position. That's the first move that really jumps at me because, okay, if the knight was already on c6, you played a3 to go b4, there'd be a5 right in your face. But here it feels like we have this moment to do b4 and maybe bishop b2, and that d-pawn feels a little difficult to defend. So I kind of like b4. What do you think?
Yeah, it always feels like a huge win when you get to play b, because normally you have to, perform the 12 labors of Hercules in order to get b4 in these Benoni positions. When you get to play this move, all on your own, you're like, what's the trap? Is there an ambush waiting for me?
Exactly.
I'm definitely playing p4 here, and guess what? I think black is worse. I'm very puzzled that Fabiano has allowed this that easily. He just seems dejected. I don't know. I don't want to read too much into the body language, but he seems frustrated, and I think Kravtsev needs to try to step on the gas pedal here. This is a big chance for him to get a big advantage out of the opening and exploit perhaps a little bit of tilt from Fabi.
Yeah, he didn't just lose a game last round. Let's remember, he lost the position that he was much better in, and I think that always hits differently. It doesn't matter how strong you are. That will always cause you to. It'll stay in your mind. So you're playing this game, you're thinking about, man, if I just done this differently, like, oh, it was so winning for me. And when those thoughts enter your mind, you lose your objectivity. And I love the move b4.
Good
Martin
call.
is going for it. I think he's got, as you said, great chances to really stick it to Fabiano before Fabi maybe makes a draw or gets comfortable and gets his white pieces again.
Yeah, and before we switch once again to the Hikaru Nakamura game, we've got a couple of updates there. Should be pointed out that if black plays a5, white goes b5. And normally, the black knight is able to entrench itself on the c5 square. But I think given black's lack of development here and the weakness of d4, and the fact that white can play bishop a3 to stop knight c5, this isn't as effective as it normally is. White is going to be, look at the eval bar. Look at black's pieces. They're stuck in molasses. He's in some trouble here in the opening. We'll keep an eye on his attempts to get himself out of the woods. But speaking of getting out of the woods, Mr. Nakamura with another trick here to get himself out of what was a really, really difficult position. But Vasquez has just blundered a pawn.
Wow, and the game progressed, I would say, quite well for Rodrigo. I was actually thinking when we left it that, okay, maybe he kind of let it slip away a bit, but wow, he plays C takes. And Hikaru is got the same face as you.
C takes C5? What?
He thought he had bishop B6? That's all I got.
He thought he had bishop B6, but here after bishop B6, let's pull up an analysis board here to try to figure out what it is that Vasquez has in mind. Because here after queen takes E4, fork? I don't care. Queen E7 defends the bishop easily. What is C takes D5? Because I'm on. Let's be real. Yeah, you gave up the D5 pawn. It's not the end of the world. He could have gone queen D2, forced the knight back, and then recaptured the pawn on D6 using this typical bishop takes G7 tactic. And hey, white's not as better as he was previously, but White's not worse. I mean, White shouldn't lose this game.
No.
Rodrigo
definitely
Vasquez is, collapsing here for absolutely no reason. And now I think the move bishop c7 would dislodge the knight on d4 and cause major problems to White's king.
Yeah, I wouldn't say this is completely over, but, Hikaru had that facial expression. As soon as c takes d5 was played, it's like, he's ready to pounce. Right? As soon as you give one of these strong players just even an ounce, just like a little bit to bite on, all of a sudden, Hikaru's, look at him. He's calculating everything. He's trying to figure out. He knows he's a little bit better here. And you're not going to get an advantage in every game you play. So when you do spot something, a chance, an opportunity, look, he's got 8.5 minutes. He's gonna have a think here and try to figure something out with his bishop pair.
Yeah, you can see he's leaning into the camera. He is intently. He understands the importance of this moment. He's better for the first time in this match, in this entire match, in the first 2 games. And Hikaru always delivers in these situations. And the reason bishop c7 is so inconvenient for White, Aman, is that if you simply drop the knight back to c4, I think there's this really pretty idea. Queen d1 check, king f2, and now bishop h2.
That's
and bishop
gorgeous.
g1 is completely unstoppable. You're going to win something on this diagonal. It might be the queen, might be the bishop, but you're not getting both the queen and the bishop off of the g1 a7 diagonal in time.
And the king is
because
stuck.
the king has no moves.
Oh, that's gorgeous, Daniel. Bishop h2 is so visual.
Look at this. And no checks. The pawn on b6 perfectly placed. The king perfectly placed, covering e7. My lands. And queen f4 by Vasquez, I think the best that he can do, actually.
Right. Hikaru looked like when he played bishop c7, I mean, he probably saw the bishop h2 stuff in about 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And then queen f4, it looks like he was ready for. So he anticipated this. Queen g6 played, guarding checkmate. And let's not forget, that was a mate 1 threat on f7. And now bishop e5. And you're highlighting the tactics here. White's got pressure on f7. Black's got pressure on the g file. Bishop takes h3 is in the air.
So the line that needs to be calculated first and foremost, before we look at that, I will point out that f6, I think, is not that scary for White. And I think it's due to the move knight c4, again, exploiting the pin. So after bishop h3, I think White was able to play queen f7 and maybe hold the draw in the second. But Hikaru, he does play the move f6. So scratch that. Let's get back to the game. I think knight c4 might allow White to solve his problems and emerge from this game unscathed.
And I guess, the thing is, it's the move f6. You're just going to lose the game unless you find knight c4. Maybe you can play knight f7. I don't know how weird that is, but point is, you're kind of forcing your opponent to find a good move.
Knight f7, that's a hilarious move. I think actually the only reason that you want the knight on c4 is that after bishop takes h3, you have this move bishop d6 check, and then you actually need the services of your knight. You need the division of labor. The queen defends the bishop, the knight defends the pawn. And I think this far advanced passer gives White sufficient compensation for the pawn.
That's incredible, honestly. First of all, I would play knight c4 after f6. But I wouldn't do it because I necessarily saw all this. It's just the move. It's just the move that has to be played. So that this just all works out is probably going to be, honestly, for lack of a better word, frustrating for Hikaru. I think if he sort of notices that this line works out for Rodrigo, he might think that he's near winning after f6.
Yeah, and for Vasquez's sake, you hope that he isn't under the impression that he has blundered terribly, because if you fall into that trap, especially against Hikaru, that could actually impact your ability to successfully find defensive options. If you think the game is over, then you're not looking as resiliently at the stuff that you could do. But it's amazing how resilient White's remaining pieces are. They're able to defend everything in the center and take the sting out of bishop takes h3. So will Rodrigo Vasquez find the only move here? Knight c4. I don't see a single other thing that he could do.
Yeah, you could play queen g3. Of course, queen b1 is the answer, but queen g3 is the only other construction that comes to mind. But credit to Rodrigo, he spent his time, spent it wisely, found knight c4, a necessary only move, and it's kind of passing the ball back to Hikaru's side of the court, saying, okay, now I found the tough move. What comes next? Bishop h3. You pointed out this bishop d6 move is going to be really, really key.
By the way, I will interrupt the coverage for a second to say that we are aware that there is more unfolding drama. There's a game between Carlsen and Niemann that apparently Carlsen just resigned in 2 moves. But this is a Chess.com Global Championship broadcast. There's also a broadcast that you're welcome to watch on the other tournament. So we are going to stay focused on these games. You're obviously welcome to choose the games that you watch, but we're commentating this tournament, and we've got plenty of action to go around, Amon. So we're going to stay focused on this because this Hikaru match, this Fabiano Caruana match, could really come down to the wire. Bishop d6 is on the board. All credit to Vasquez for finding these 3 or 4 key defensive moves.
Yep, and I think every match that we've been privy to thus far has been tremendously exciting, not only just in the first round, but the fact that the favorites find themselves behind. And this was what I was alluding to earlier. I feel like Hikaru might see the move knight e3 and just get this look of like, I can't believe this works. Like, what? Like, how? What?
Usually he's on the black side of such. He's on the other side of such constructions, when you're like, I'm finally beating him. I finally have him nailed down. And somehow he gets out of it.
Yeah, this is amazing how the knight, and he's starting to get that feeling. I have the same one. I can't believe that this knight went to like d6, c4, e3, and suddenly it's just being held together here. Miraculous.
Yeah, to be honest with you, after Vasquez took on d6, I just got the sense that Hikaru was going to win in 3 moves.
Yeah.
But he's managed to maintain his composure, and maybe that wealth, the decades-long wealth of experience, is helping Vasquez out here. He's not really a tilter. He stayed composed, and he was able to find moves on demand. Hikaru, of course, is still going to be playing for a win. He's going to be taking risks here. But after bishop c7, which has just been played instantly, the d-pawn is ready to rumble. It's a 3-result game.
I was going to say, after d6 here, like, how much do you want to play for every result, Daniel? Because that bishop could end up on f8.
Whoa. There's g4 here.
Wow.
Oh, my lands.
d4. That's an incredible move.
d7 is threatened. The bishop is trapped. Black has to choose his poison. If you stop the d-pawn, you lose the bishop.
That's unbelievable.
Oh, my God. If Vasquez, and he doesn't find it, he plays bishop takes b6.
So logical, bishop b6. I mean,
oh, look how quickly Hikaru dropped his bishop away from h3. I'm getting the heck out of there.
I'm not risking that for another second. b4. But look, the thing is, no matter what happens with the position, doesn't white just play maybe a5, bishop c5, and black's bishop from f8 doesn't really see the light of day again.
It sees the light of the d6 pawn, but I agree. No, such positions are almost impossible to evaluate. I think the problem that white might encounter is if black parks the queen on d3, the pawn is never really going to get to d7. So I'm not totally seeing how white's going to make progress here. And I feel like if one of the sides ends up making a blunder, the probability that white blunders is greater, and it's not just because, Hikaru's got the black pieces. Although that's part of it, I'll admit.
Yeah, but that's always part of it, right? When you're playing a guy like Hikaru, there's a sort of a stigma that he carries around with him. And, the best players definitely put more pressure on their opponents just by nature.
Yeah, you feel like every move you're making is a blunder, even if you're like recapturing a queen.
Yeah.
You're nodding your head. This is one of those relatable feelings that all grandmasters share. That of just facing Hikaru Nakamura, period.
Yep. Exactly. So this looks like a great achievement for Vasquez after that knight takes d5 incident, I'll call it earlier. I think his recovery has been tremendous. And look at the position he's got on the board. Yes, he's facing the 2 bishops, but he's put himself in a position and he's totally equalized this game again.
Yeah, he has. And Hikaru now is down on the clock. He's below 4 minutes, and that could potentially play a role as he delivers the check on b1. Let's take a quick detour and look at the other games. We will catch the end of this game, worry not. But you have a pretty crazy development in the Bortnyk game. We're only 15 moves in. White is completely lost in this position. What the heck happened to Alexander's position?
Yeah, it's never a good sign when you see the double pawns. It means c takes b3 has been played.
Yeah, I know.
That's not the way you usually want to capture. So really, really good start for Jeffrey. And you kind of mentioned that he would likely go for a position that gave him some chances. He's not just trying to make a draw and call it a day. And I think that's exactly what we see on the board here.
I actually will say that I think Bortnyk's decision to not take the Berlin draw when he had that chance is a strategic mistake, given who Bortnyk is as a chess player and how good he is with the black pieces. Bortnyk's got his systems worked out. They worked for him in the first game. I think a draw here would put him so close to winning this match. Now he's staring down the barrel of essentially a lost position in the middle game. He's down 4.5 minutes. Jeffrey has to find a way to convert this.
For sure. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Hindsight, of course, is 2020. If you're looking at this position, then you're like,
give me that draw.
Yeah, yeah. I'll take that draw.
I'll take the draw for 200, Alex.
No, this doesn't look comfortable at all. Bishop on a6, so strong. D takes on e4 is a big threat right now because it's actually going to be followed up by bishop to d3, and then knight takes on e4, which is just so unpleasant.
So white should probably go rook 81 here, but that just puts a band-aid over the problem. It doesn't solve the underlying issues of white's position. Black has a million ways to improve his position. Queen b6, rook c8. Jeffrey playing confidently, quickly, and hitting that e3 pawn where it hurts.
Yeah, and the thing is, he doesn't even have to spend 10 seconds calculating queen b6. It's a good move. He knows where the pieces go. White is back under the gun here.
As the overused expression goes, the move plays itself. If Bortnyk pulls a draw out of this, this would be the ultimate miracle. And the same probably goes for Fabiano Caruana, who is similarly suffering. Kravtsev has a pawn on b5. Man, not much to say here in Black's favor. This just sucks.
I mean, the knight got to e6, so I'm actually now wondering what knight that was. It's like
which knight is on a5?
Exactly, but weird position for Fabiano. He has this like long-term dream of maybe b6, knight c5, bishop b7, but the thing is, you're just not going to be afforded all those moves at once. That's just not going to happen. So what you're left with is a bishop on c8 that can't develop, and this knight on a5 that is requiring so much attention, right? Queen is actually, strangely, not on e2. It's on e1. So there is an X-ray idea of hitting that knight on a5. Knight e4.
Yeah, there is.
Obvious
but
move and hits the knight.
It's hard to engineer that, though, because if you play knight e4 prematurely, then you're actually giving Black the chance to swing the knight around to c5. On the other hand, maybe you want to allow this and then do something like, I mean, you can see that the eval bar has not dropped. Okay, it did drop with that move. So maybe bishop c5 and b6 should be considered. I really think if white does anything on the queen side, it's going to end up being good. Just because of how bad Black's pieces are placed and how advanced white's queen side pawns are. I just think that Kravtsev needs to make a decision quickly because I don't know if he's going to be able to survive another middle game where he's got below a minute on the clock.
That's a good point. So relatable for a guy like me looking at someone get low on time. I mean, it really has to be said there is a big difference here in the overall level, and Kravtsev, he might just be a player that naturally takes more time. He might be overthinking the current situation, but he has reminded us how good he can play with that low time. So that's a redeeming quality, that it's not just like, somebody that you don't really trust with low time in a time scramble. So he's got that going for him, but just like with anything, people like to say, oh, Alexander Grishuk, he plays better when he's low on time. He's better than when he has more time. It's just not true.
No. Even Alexander Grishuk would accept more time if you gave it to him. But yeah, Martin Kravtsev, he is one to watch. If you want to assemble, a list of lesser known grandmasters who you want to watch, if you want to enrich your understanding of chess and really watch some exciting players, put Martin Kravtsev on that list. And I think he's going to be on a lot of players' lists after this match, win or lose. He's got Fabiano Caruana against the wall in yet another game. Like I said earlier, Aman, nobody has surmounted a 2-0 deficit in the CGC thus far. So Fabi needs to pull a rabbit out of the hat, and he needs to do it rapidly.
Yeah, he needs to do it in the rapid portion as well.
In the rapid portion, yeah.
All the above as we transition back to Hikaru's game here. And I think, is it fair to say that the position looks kind of how you thought it would? Pawn on
Yes.
a5, bishop c5, Black is blockading that pawn on d7. But the main question is, although the king for white is very exposed, what can Black do to actually push forward? Because I look at that bishop on f8 and I say, look, if it can't move, if it can't actually join the game, then I'm not feeling this two bishop edge.
No, you called this, I think, earlier, the fact that the bishop being out of the game essentially just totally limits the amount of damage that Black is able to inflict on White's king. The only construction that I see which could cause any amount of objective damage other than a perpetual check, I don't think Black will have any problems figuring out a way to deliver perpetual, is if you can put the light squared bishop on the long diagonal. But White's basically saying, hey, over my dead body, I'm going to keep the queen on that diagonal. But Hikaru is finding ways to get this a little bit more complicated. Like if you play knight e3 here, you have to reckon with bishop takes d6. But according to the computer, I think because the pawn on a6 falls, White is going to be able to hold this position. But he's got to see that.
Yep. And even in these positions, start to get a little, it can be scary because your pawn is being hit. And meanwhile, the bishop or the queen could be just a great blockader of those two pawns on the queen side.
And yet again, when you're playing Hikaru, every enemy, every danger is amplified hundredfold. So you see the bishop on d5, and I'm going to get checkmated for sure on g2. Whereas with someone else, no problem. I'm just going to drop the queen back to f1. With Hikaru, your mentality is completely different. As Vasquez ponders where to put his knight in this critical moment, could a case be made for knight b6, or does that, concentrate too many pieces on the queen side? Would you be scared to play such a move?
So the reason I would be scared to play it is I look at this position and I see that Black has queen e1, queen h4, or queen h5, queen d1. I see that a draw is always available. And because I see that, if I extend my pieces a little bit too far away from my king, then in the best case scenario, I'm making that perpetual as white. But in the worst case, it could be a loss. So I want to keep my pieces closer. I like his decision to play knight e3. I think that was more practical. Now the final step is take that pawn, and I think we're going to be very close to even territory.
I hate to jump around too much, but crazy stuff is happening on both of the other two boards. First and foremost, Fabiano Caruana, I just spent like the minute that you were, or the 30 seconds you were talking, counting the minor pieces like again and again, and making sure that Fabi is indeed down a full piece, which he is. This one's essentially over.
It's evened up as well. There's not even a time edge.
No, there's just nothing to say here. We'll jump to the other game. White is up a full piece. Fabi had to give it away to prevent, the massacre on the queen side. It was a massacre on the queen side, and now it's a full piece up. It should be a pretty straightforward technical task for. And
what the heck happened? How did he drop that piece? I guess it was the knight on a5. Ooh, c5. Wow.
Oy, oy, oy. And then he took it and goodbye knight.
Wow, that's incredible.
There's just nowhere to put it. Look at that bishop on before. Total domination.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
Jeez,
knight
okay,
fg5.
so
and the attack is not diminished.
Trouble. Yeah, exactly. Like Martin is not saying, okay, I'm up a piece. Let me just try to chill out, convert. No, he's going for the throat. Again, knight g5. I think he's playing beautifully this match. And you called a 2-0. This looks like it's going to be a 2-0 for Martin. And then Fabi is in a must-win position from here on out.
And that's not the only crazy thing that's happened. Jeffrey Zhang has frittered away his entire advantage. So much so that Alexander Bortnyk's actually better here. What the heck happened here? He gave up a rook for two incredibly well-positioned knights.
I don't get it.
What happened after queen b6? He played bishop takes d3, rook takes d6, d takes c4, rook d6,
and take.
What the heck was knight d5?
Why
did he take the knight?
I have no idea. That makes no sense to me. And then you can do knight d5.
Maybe he accidentally, sometimes it happens where you play the second move of the variation. You forgot that you didn't make the first move.
Right. Because here, there's queen takes e4. No, there's something totally off, right? Like that's just something that you don't expect.
And it's a miracle that Jeffrey is able to recover at least some of the material, isn't it? He's able to go knight f6. But Alexander Bortnyk is back from the dead here. But he is down to 34 seconds, so it's still very much a 3-result game.
Yep. And ticking down, it looks like, I after rook d8. He's really under the gun to come up with a move, and rook c1 was the choice.
Wow. By the way, quick draw. Agreed in the Hikaru game as we expected.
Yeah, we did, and that is, again, definitely a good result for Rodrigo. He is the underdog. I think he's been acquitting himself really, really well in that match, so we'll stay tuned for the conclusion of that one as well.
Yeah, he definitely has. I'm also keeping an eye on the Caruana game because Bobby is not going gentle into that good night, let's put it that way. But we're sticking on this game for now. Bortnyk down to 18 seconds. He has to make sure that he contains Black's pawn majority in the center. You can't allow like f5, e4, and f4.
Knight c1 is the wrong kind of move for me. Like f6 definitely stands out. Also rook d1. I'm sure that knight takes e5 is a little bit too frisky of a move. So I definitely like f6. Then I think rook d1. And where does that knight go from c1? It's just like it's stuck.
No, you called it, because if the knight moves away, the moment the knight moves away, the rook slides back to d3 and starts vacuuming up these incredibly weak b pawns. 8 seconds for Bortnyk. In the long run, I don't see this happening for him. I think Jeffrey Zhang is going to pull this one out.
Yep. Time to maybe bring the king or move the pawns if you're black. I think every piece is pretty much situated perfectly here.
Yeah, and it's very depressing that you can improve the position ad infinitum. You can just go king f7, h5, g5, bring the king in, and one way or another, eventually something has got to give for white.
Yeah, you can't sit there while black advances every single pawn, one move at a time. The knight, as you said, moving from c1 would allow either rook to d3, check, and the b3 pawn falls.
Yeah. And Jeffrey taking his time, trying to figure out the best way to improve his position, to optimize his pawn majority, and he does default to king f7. And it is the hardest thing, Aman, when you've got 3 seconds and you have to go back and forth. That's so much harder when you have no time on your clock. And 92 by Sasha. Oh, look at that trap. Let me show this really quickly. If you go rook d3 and rook takes b3, knight c1 traps the rook.
That's amazing. Didn't notice
that. He found
that.
this with what, 2 seconds left?
Right.
Holy cannoli.
Yeah, and it still works if you use the other rook.
Yeah.
It doesn't work as well, but it's still a great idea.
No, it still wins the piece. Rook d3. Do not take that pawn. Oh,
what?
King e4, though.
But now you're almost getting mated in so many lines.
Yeah, it's a miracle that king e6 isn't mate because of rook c6 check. But Jeffrey could set things up with a move like g6 here. No, if Bortnyk survives this, then something is in the air today. I mean, something's already in the air today.
Oh, it definitely is. It's been the underdog day for sure in every single match thus far. King e4, though, instead of king f2, means probably he was very uncomfortable with the move e4 from black.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Although I think after knight e1 there, the knights actually don't do such a bad job of defending key squares in white's camp. But Jeffrey, you know, when you've got a minute left and you're trying to find checkmate, it's an infuriating sensation. If you're not finding it, it's easy to start panicking.
Yep. Well, he's got a block here. I guess you could go king e7. I'm not sure if there's any
you could.
specific reason to do that. Like, now rook takes b3 is an idea. So I'm thinking maybe there's a way to move the king, but no, white just gives another check on c7.
Bortnyk is a magician in these situations, though. How many of these comebacks have we seen from him? No time, bad position, and yet he somehow stays alive. The rooks are off the board. And Aman, I think the time is right for Jeffrey to start pushing his kingside pawns.
So I think we'll see f5, g3, because white wants to go knight d2, knight c4. And if the knight ends up on c4, at least it's a solid square, ties black down, but there's no question in my mind, h6, g5, e4, white is definitely worse off here.
And rook d1 is an excellent move. Rook takes d3, I think, finishes the game.
Oh, that's a great move. That's a great
e4.
move.
Pawn endgame, up a pawn on the king side, and white is way too slow getting to b5. Technically, material is equal, but I mean...
Well, he can't play king e3, because then the pass pawn gets created, but also king c4, king b5, he knows he's too slow.
Yeah, I think the simplest is just go g5 and h5.
Mm-hmm.
Just push these pawns, create a passer, distract white's king. It's the classic, and Bortnyk is going to go down. What a game by Jeffrey. Equalizing on demand.
Yeah, this is going to be just g4, easy creation of a pass pawn.
We can switch to the other game because Fabiano Caruana, like I said, he is doing everything in his power to keep this game going. Both sides under 10 seconds. Kravtsev's still up a piece, and his knight is heading to e5.
Yeah, you can also throw in like bishop b2 or something just to try to win that a pawn. Bishop e5 just as effective.
I don't know about bishop e5 though, because now the knight is less effective at stopping the passer. But knight f8, what a move! He takes e6.
Yeah, I love it. I think he's
you're right.
He's wrangling pawns.
h4.
Rook.
Oh,
what a trick! What a trick!
He might lose.
That's the only square. That's the only square you can't put the rook.
Anywhere but there. A5, A6, A4. Holy smokes, he could lose this.
He could lose this game.
Rook takes E2.
Rook takes.
He's going to lose.
Unbelievable.
Holy smokes.
He's actually going to lose this game. There's still conversion to be had, but that's just turned around on its head. I can't believe that Fabi can't even believe it. He looks upset.
Fabi's upset on Martin's behalf. He's like,
yeah, I don't deserve this.
What black
he's
magic
saying.
is this? And now he just brings his king somewhere.
Oh
D4.
God.
There's no fortress here. White's rook has no anchored squares.
No. The king comes in as far as it can.
He's devastated. King d4, rook takes f5, queen e4 picks up the rook. It's all over. Daniel lost.
Yep, this is done. Unbelievable. Martin Kravtsev is, well, if we don't witness it on camera, he will literally be kicking himself at some point today. I can guarantee it. That is the only square you can't go to, Dania, as you're highlighting some of the other ones. He needed to leave his rook on the A file. We understand that. But all he needed was a safe square. A4 would have done it. Then you just use the knight to pick up the rest of those loose pawns.
Yeah, because here, the key difference, of course, is that you can play GH, and you can do whatever the heck you want. Take A2, go knight D4, you're chilling. But after rook A3, H4, you can't take the pawn because of rook H3 check with a skewer. Unbelievable happenings here at the CGC, as both of the top seeds have equalized the match with the black pieces. I can't believe what we just saw. But in any case, Hikaru Nakamura, his score is 1-1. Everyone's score is 1-1. And everything is yet to be decided in the last two games. We're going to take another short break. You better not be going anywhere because we are in for a barn burner here at the Chess.com Global Championship. Back with the other two games of the round of 64 matchups in just a couple of moments.
Open to anyone, all around the world. The Chess.com Global Championship offers the dream of playing against the best.
Whoa!
And hey, have we mentioned there's also $1 million at stake?
The total pot is $1 million.
No, that is not a typo. The prizes are unbelievably generous.
We began with thousands of players. Now only dozens remain.
It's over.
Wow. Ray Robson, he chuckles. He's not happy, but he respects the legend of Ivanchuk, and that legend continues.
The CGC knockout phase has arrived. There are those who played their way in, and some are here thanks to their well-earned reputations. No matter who you are, things are about to get very, very real.
Queen G8 check. Queen G8?
Queen G8,
oh
Queen
my God!
C8.
Oh my internet!
A trip to the CGC finals and a clean shot at the largest first place prize of the year. My friends, it's the CGC round of 64. Who will take the next step to Toronto?
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the CGC. As we have a glimpse here at the tournament overview, thousands competed in the open qualifiers. 32 made their way through their qualifiers. 32 more were invited as the organizers' invites. The knockout phase began with a round of 64. After today, we will have only 32 remaining. The round of 32 will be contested very, very shortly. It will start on this coming Wednesday. At the start of October, there will be a round of 16, and that in turn will determine which privileged few get to travel to Toronto, Canada to compete in the CGC finals at the start of November. Aman, we will be in Toronto. It's going to be a fascinating final. It'll be lit, as the young people like to say. But right now, what's going to be even more lit is Hikaru Nakamura, who has not been able to get the lead over Rodrigo Vasquez in the first two games of the match. In fact, none of the top seeds have.
Yeah, it's really, really crazy what we're seeing here. I've witnessed so many different days of broadcast for the CGC. Definitely seen some upsets, but I don't think I've seen a day where every single match appears to be up for grabs, totally up for grabs. It should be a 2-0 deficit here for Fabiano Caruana. Instead, it's 1-1. He's breathed new life. Meanwhile, you've got Rodrigo completely hanging in there with Hikaru. It's 1-1 with two draws as we see their match getting underway. Danya, knight f3 again from Hikaru.
Yeah, knight f3, and this time he decides to fianchetto his dark squared bishop. And with Rodrigo Vasquez's second move, he guarantees that Hikaru is not going to be playing, most likely, the double fianchetto setup. Instead, we're going to get a Grunfeld. Main line.
Yep. C4.
Okay.
Interesting. So Vasquez with the, I guess they play queen b3 in this, just making that bishop on c8 feel like it has to stay at home a little bit longer. Queen b6 here, and white can even be happy with some of those positions where the queens come off the board.
This is an opening I know nothing about because my pawn is always on d6, as you know. I like pushing the pawn to d5 is like, a brave feat that I have never mustered up the courage to do. I only played this once, and it happened to be against Vladimir Kramnik in a classical game. Let's say I chose quite poorly when it came to the type of player against whom you should try a new opening. It didn't go well.
Yeah, I was gonna say you really reserved it for it's
for the big guys. I wanted to practice it against someone who isn't very theoretically advanced first, and then I decided to take it to the big fish.
Right. No, that's the way to do it. This is like you keep it in a trophy case and only bring it up for the very, very best. Yeah.
Indeed. Queen b3, though, has given Rodrigo Vasquez pause, and not a lot of moves in the opening have given him pause. He has been playing with lightning speed in the first 15 to 20 moves, sometimes to his detriment.
Yeah, and indeed he missed a chance in game one because of that. But I think that he also kind of knows maybe himself as a player. Maybe this is just who he is, but I think he's also playing to his strengths. He doesn't want to be in time pressure. Like, Hikaru is, first of all, going to make anybody blunder in a time scramble when he's putting pressure and you've got the clock working against you. So I think Rodrigo is just saying, look, I might miss a few things in the middle game, maybe in the opening, just playing a little bit too fast, but I want to keep this pace up for the match because I don't want to deal with time pressure at all. And I think that's an interesting strategy because that's one area where Hikaru beats pretty much everybody in the world. And if you just don't let yourself get there, you might miss some things on the way, but you take give and take a little bit. So interesting strategy.
I think overall it is a successful strategy, and players of all levels can relate to the incredibly tilting feeling of facing an opponent who seems to be playing super fast. But he must be blundering. There's no way he could be playing this fast in a position this complex, and yet the blunder never seems to come. Knight BD7, disapproved of by the eval bar. The main, no, it's not time to stretch, Alexa, I'm commentating. The main move is bishop f5 here, developing the bishop outside the chain and then going knight bd7. I think the drawback here, Amon, is that white is able to quickly push the pawn to e4, occupying the center.
Yeah, pawn to e4, rook d1, knight c3. This looks like Hikaru is going to be very happy with how things have developed. And, well, he's definitely saying, I want to play the move e5. I'm not sure that he can do that, though. First of all, rook d1 looks like a great place to start.
And where are you going to put your queen? Because if you move to c7, it walks right into bishop f4.
Exactly. Yeah, and
so
queen
maybe
b6.
But okay.
Yeah, little something.
Yes, but white a little better. Yeah, feeling that black. Maybe knight a3, yeah, prophylactic, yeah? This typical Hikaru move. I guarantee Hikaru will play knight a3. I have played Hikaru so many times, I know exactly what he will do even before he knows what he will do.
I think you're dead right. Yeah, knight a3.
Okay, knight bd2. Same concept, though.
A worse move, honestly. Eval bar disapproves.
No, I actually think knight a3 was, yeah. The top move was actually a4.
Probably
A5
intending knight a3.
Actually, no, but we're not going to talk about that. Knight bd2, same thing. Synonyms.
Yeah. Heading to c4, and okay, e5, once again, not possible. So it just feels like black's last 1, 2, now 3 moves have all been to do one single move, e5. And it's still not possible, and Hikaru hasn't, gone out of his way, right? It's not like he's taking a huge detour, and he's got, a, queen on f4 and a rook on e3. No, he's just developing normally here.
Yeah, he doesn't have some orchestrated all of this thing. He just develops his pieces and simultaneously stopped e5.
Yeah.
And this is the first bad position that Rodrigo essentially has in the entire match. And it's going to be a very trying time for him the next couple of moves because Hikaru is so good at stepping on the gas pedal in these situations. Hikaru senses it. He knows that if he can expand his advantage in the next couple of moves, he could just wipe Rodrigo off the board. So let's see how Rodrigo handles this challenge.
Knight c4, bishop f4, rook c1. It's hand me the most basic way to develop, and it's probably also maybe the best moves. So Hikaru's going to have no issue. I think he's actually going to play this position in a way that could be very boa constrictor-like. He doesn't need to rush. He doesn't need to play e4 and wow, I love it when I say something like that and I see the move h3. Thank you, Hikaru. That's exactly what I was saying. Boa constrictor.
Your comment aged like a fine wine. h3, very slowly. Knight c4, and Hikaru is going to nurture and try to expand his advantage. And as he does that, it's a perfect opportunity for us to stop by the other 2 games, which have begun.
That's right.
Again, we can start with Jeffrey against Alexander. A little bit of deja vu here.
Yeah, partner? Do you think he looked at this a little bit? Because knight takes c6, certainly not the first move that you look at, because you know that black can play b takes c6 and immediately hit your bishop. You have to react to that threat. He played bishop takes c6 the first time, but Engine approves of knight takes c6, and this reeks of your opening isn't supposed to be good, and I didn't get a good position, so let me fix that.
Yeah, exactly. And the bishop drops back to a4 here. Kind of an interesting way to arrange the pieces, putting more pressure on the c6 pawn. And in game 1, we did see Jeffrey pushing this pawn up to e5, effectuating this central pawn trade. I think he's still eyeing that. And I think there's no question that white is a pull here. Right? Black doesn't play the Philidor and then claim, I've equalized. Black plays it because he's just comfortable with the resulting positions. I think a lot of people have a hard time understanding that. You can play openings to equalize objectively, but in the rapid time control, I think it's far more important to play something that you are comfortable with and whose ideas you know well.
Yep, that's a great point. When time is lower, you want to be more familiar with your environment. And there's nobody more familiar, probably, with this opening and the Alekhine than Alexander Bortnyk. So he's once again bringing it out. It worked really well the last time, but Jeffrey clearly has looked at what to do, improved on the first game. Do you think he's going to leave that bishop on a4? So I wonder, let's say rook b8 happens on the board. Do we play like b3? Or maybe even bishop b3? Because if the bishop goes back to b3, then I kind of wonder, why did we go to a4 and not c4 earlier?
Yeah. The mental pushback I have to b3 is that you almost never play this move because of b7, b5. But the vestiges of the b pawn are still dissuading me from playing this move. But you pointed out in game one that it also weakens the entire long diagonal. So black could even consider something like knight g4 and bishop f6 maybe. Or, I don't know, if you could move this bishop away from d7 and put a knight there, reshuffling the minor pieces in order to occupy the long diagonal with the dark squared bishop could be something to consider. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Jeffrey actually will play b3 in the event of rook b8.
I think it's b3 reeks of I've prepared this move and it looks weird,
Stackfish.
Boy. Gotcha. We might see b3 like quickly.
Oh no, we saw e5 quickly. So this still reeks of preparation, but a different kind of preparation.
Yeah. Absolutely. Really cool idea. Not only does the e5 bishop, if pawn takes, not only does that eyeball the rook on b2, should you play rook takes b2, but also bishop b3 after rook takes b2, and you actually kind of get stuck in there.
Yeah, the trap closes, bishop b3 comes, and knight d or a anywhere. Like literally any square is good. You win the exchange on b2. So Sasha is probably not going to take on b2. Now, before making that decision, he's got to decide whether he takes on e5. In contrast to the first time Jeffrey played e5, here, I think there's maybe a slightly stronger case to be made for a move like knight e8. As passive as this move appears, black's center is surprisingly resilient. b2 is still hanging. So I think Bortnyk is seriously considering the alternatives. But my guess is that he's still going to take on e5.
What about knight d5?
Okay.
Can we try to simplify everything? This is like an interesting way as black to say, okay, I'm, comfortable with the draw somehow.
So I take everything, and then you just take b2?
Yeah.
Yeah. And this already is equal because you can't trap the rook, but okay. This is the moment when you raise your voice for 5 octaves.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like that moment when you say the position, okay, position balanced, yes.
I think that as the position equalizes, the voice goes up. It's a very deep voice when you have an advantage. I actually have no idea what you do here, but it's almost equal,
So that's so right. That's like the classic Eastern European chess player interview. It's like, okay, here the opposite position was equal, yeah, complicated, but then we decided to agree for draw. You're totally right. I think you see this with Viktor Korchnoi interviews too.
Anyways, and has he played it as well, or was that
has he played?
Board? Yeah,
no, that was our board. I reset.
Okay.
The current position is after e5. He's still thinking.
Gotcha. Yeah, knight d5 looks like a big consideration here. Otherwise, your move knight e8 if he wants to leave more on the board, more to play for.
No, but knight e8 sucks. It's way too passive. And as Alexander Bortnyk ponders his next move in this critical moment, we are going to switch to the Fabiano Caruana game. And
let's see it.
What haven't we seen in the Caruana Kravtsov match in the first 2 games? Well, I think what we have seen is a Queen's Gambit decline, and they are also repeating the same opening from game 1. But not the same variation.
Yeah, I was wondering how the heck this knight got on h4, but obviously black must have brought the bishop to f5. White said, okay, no. Knight h4, let's not have that. And then white got his own bishop to d3, but at the cost of some valuable time, right? Spending time on knight h4, knight back to f3. Yeah, you get your bishop there, but it's given Martin time to play the move knight to e4.
On the other hand, it usually is, but I think Martin may have bitten off a little bit more than he can chew here. Now, the typical way that you treat this knight on e4, by treat I mean remove, is you move the knight away from f3, and then you push the pawn up to f3. And if that happens, then at the end of the day, black is left with these very kind of, I wouldn't say weak, but a bunch of semi-weaknesses in the center. And of course, white also has the corresponding outpost on e5.
Yep, absolutely. Knight e5, f3. And white often tries to play knight e5, f3 with the pawn on f7. And then the knight gets kicked out of e5 eventually. But as you said, that's now white's outpost. And when you play this sort of these stonewall moves, d5, f5, to support a central outpost, what you're doing is you're handing over the e5 square to your opponent permanently. Meanwhile, like if you look at white's position, I can play pawn f3. So white has the e5 square totally in their control, but black doesn't have the e4 square just for them. So it's not really, a balanced trade there.
Yeah, that's a great point. There is an asymmetry in both sides' control of these corresponding squares. I'm fully expecting f3 from Fabi. I mean, this move is not without its positional risks. Right. Obviously, you're weakening the e3 pawn. Sometimes black is able to counterstrike with g7, g5. And maybe even here, g5, yeah, the eval bar didn't laugh this out of the park. So maybe that's something Fabi has to reckon with.
Yeah, g5 and, pawn takes e4. Just a total mess, honestly.
f3 is on the board, by the way. So once again, maybe I won't have to play any of these moves.
Yeah, no, sit back. Let them analyze the position for us.
Let them calculate. We will sip our coffees and watch the action unfold. But the psychological undercurrent of this game, Aman, Martin Kravtsov has to find a way to push that tragedy that befell him in the last round. I mean, he was up a full piece in the end game. Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen a situation go south that quickly.
It's so true. Like in an end game, things usually get more clarified, and it absolutely was. He had done things beautifully. He was just not even thinking about the possibility he could be worse, and that's when it really just blindsides you, right? When you're not even considering you could be worse, all of a sudden, okay, I'm not winning, I'm drawing. All of a sudden, oh, I'm not drawing, I'm lost. And that happened in a matter of 2 moves. So I just hope that he's put that, in a different room, closed the door, and focused on his match.
He did. I think he walked out of the room right after that game.
Yeah.
I would have walked out of the room, and you would have heard the punches from South Carolina. But what I was going to say is that, when you encounter a move like h4 after rook a3, your stomach literally leaps into your throat. Your throat just closes. Oh, and then you just can't think straight because Kravtsov still should have drawn that game. And guess what? He still would have been up a point. For this match to be tied is absolutely crazy. And I think the opening has been largely successful for Fabi. He decided against g5. And that gives Fabi, I think, essentially what he wants out of the opening: control of e5 and some pressure on the f5 square. I think he's slightly better.
Yeah, and also the move bishop takes f5 it's really going to put black out, because then all of a sudden the e6 square is so weak. So when you think about how to defend this, g6 comes to mind, but also takes a knight d7. I feel like is a little bit of a nicer way to do it. Pawn to g6 by black, not always a great thing. Sometimes you can even meet pawn to g6 with pawn to g4 or pawn to e4, as you said.
Oh, open up the position, right? Especially when black creates these permanent weaknesses on the king side. Yep. Now Fabi has to decide where he puts his bishop and whether he even moves it away, because f4 is absolutely not out of the question. You'd rather have a knight on e5, but, a bishop is the next best thing.
Yeah.
I think he's going to go f4.
Yeah, after f4, let's say that black goes knight f6. There's a couple things.
Yeah, but
First of all, oh, sorry, yeah. That the pawn is hanging there. I wanted to say that if the knight gets into e4, white can take that piece, and even though black takes back, there's no pass pawn. Whereas if black takes on e5, white takes back and gets a protected pass pawn going up the board, just because of the differences in the pawn structure. Pawn on e3 versus pawn on c6.
And it's interesting. The eval bar is only giving 0.2, but, sign me up for this 0.2 any day of the week. Knight e2, knight f4. You pointed out the idea of g2, g4. That is absolutely in play here. In fact, just to illustrate the concept, yes, this is premature here, But
Yeah.
the point of g4 is to strike at g6. The bishop is undefended, and black's entire kingside is liable to collapse. So I think Fabi has done a great job of getting sort of a tilting type of position to have after you've lost a game in a manner as disappointing as he did.
Right.
So we will keep an eye on this middle game as it unfolds, as Martin Kraftov tries to come back from that tragedy that has just befallen him. In the meantime, Aman, shall we go back to the Hikaru Nakamura game?
Yeah, let's see what has happened there since we left it, because it looked like the Hikaru Nakamura show.
Goodbye, Rodrigo. It's over.
Yeah, where did the pieces go? Honestly, I can't say I'm too surprised. I don't know how Black would have played this. As we can see, the pawn on e6 is kind of like it's like a tombstone of the e5 idea. It's sitting on e6, which just means, yeah, e5 never happened. It probably was the reason that his position was worse.
When I was looking at the Grunfeld with my friend a couple of years ago, I never ended up playing the Grunfeld, except against Kramnik. He told me there's one rule that you need to abide by in the Grunfeld at all times. You never want to have a pawn on e6, and you never want to have a pawn on c6. The only time you push your e and c pawns is to the fifth rank. And it's actually a pretty good compass by which to judge the position. Now, the only consolation here, Amon, for Rodrigo is that he's got the potential to exploit the light squares along the diagonal, but he doesn't have the supporting cast, I think, to actually follow through on it. He can play bishop b7, but how is he going to get a queen to d5? Hikaru's not just going to allow that.
Right. Maybe a5.
He's going to play a5 and win.
That's
Knight f6,
right.
maybe?
d5.
But even if you allow it, okay, you play f3. Big deal.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah. That's a good point.
It's a one move threat. Bishop b7 is on the board. I think we're going to see a5 by Hikaru.
Yeah, and both sides managing their time well here. So it's not going to be, I don't think time is going to be a factor. It's just purely on the board here.
No, Hikaru has done such a good job, I think, of adjusting his opening strategy. Not a coincidence, Aman, that he played a main line in this game. I think Hikaru realizing that, the sidelines weren't working that well. They didn't work well in game one. Yep. And Hikaru knows how to play main lines. I mean, that's what he does in classical chess. And, I've talked about this with Fedoseev, a good friend. Hikaru is so good at adjusting his strategy during a match. He's not stubborn. He knows exactly what adjustments he needs to make. He's like a good football quarterback. Maybe I'm throwing too many long passes. Maybe I'm throwing too many short passes. Hikaru does that like clockwork. Yeah,
and there are some players who, let's say they only play main lines, only play sidelines. The thing about players that play sidelines, especially when they're as good as Hikaru is that they're doing that because they're already so good at the main lines. You can't get away with playing sidelines the way Hikaru does without being an expert at the main lines first. That's not how it works. So when you see him doing that, it's not because he doesn't know what's going on in the main lines. It's because he absolutely does know what's going on, and that's the reason why he can deviate.
That's a great point. And I think this game is going to end within a couple of moves. Knight takes b6. Excellent tactical vision by Nakamura. Rook takes a5. Rook c8 drops the queen.
Mm-hmm.
We can pull up an analysis board here just to show all of the sidelines. Bishop takes b1. Knight takes a8. And the bishop hangs. And if you try to drop the bishop back and say the knight is trapped, it is far from trapped. It can evacuate back to b6. Now, if you take twice, rook c8, the classic bishop h6 ends the game.
Beautiful.
It's all over. It's all over. And Vasquez should be resigning this within a couple of moves.
And if knight takes b6, that looks like the first move I would think of. Just because if you get rook takes b6, then you could try to take on a5.
Yeah, I think that was the most resilient. He does end up taking on b1, and I think we're going to
probably
see that
very
knight
similar
c6 line in action.
Honestly.
Maybe he wants queen takes a5, but then rook c8 check, and the queen takes the bishop. You've got two pieces aligned with the first rank.
Yeah, that's a nice detail. But I think Hikaru knows that he's definitely secured the full point in this particular game. Queen takes a8, and will we see? Yeah, queen takes a5. Okay, put that knight on d5. Give me h5. I'm a guy that needs maybe like 5 or 6 moves here to be totally happy.
Yeah, exactly. No, once you get a knight to d5, it's actually not going to be that easy. I forgot that black can play queen takes a8 for whatever reason, so not
because
totally
rook
over.
b8 is covered.
The +6 here could be a little bit misleading. I think it's +6 just because black is not able to get the knight to d5. The moment you play knight f6, you run into this check on b8. And white's just going to massacre the minor pieces with a queen c6, maybe d5. Too many avenues, too many threats.
That's really important to notice that, though, that the knight on d5 is actually the key for black, because the engine is going to give like a crazy high evaluation. Oh yeah, knight can't get to d5. But for a human to sit there and realize, oh, that's why my position is so good. Queen f3 by Hikaru. He wants to also play rook b7, king g2. The f7 pawn will be targeted, and I think Hikaru is going to be very comfortable here.
Yeah, and the king is perfectly safe with plenty of luft. Yeah, we're the result of this game is not in question. Hikaru never screws these kinds of games up.
Yep.
Okay, I think we can trust him to convert his totally decisive advantage. And let's do the rounds once again. Let's go to the Jeffrey Bortnyk game, which continues to heat up in that Philidor. And what is going on here? So he does have a pawn on b3. He just put it there. So we saw rook b8, b3, but a little bit later than we thought we would see it.
Yeah, I think that was one of those things I was kind of expecting that might have been part of his prep. Just a general concept. Not like, oh, I got to play b3, but if the rook ever goes to b8, then I'm kind of meeting it with the move b3. So interesting.
Funny comment in the chat. Rodrigo looks like Saul Goodman. Yeah, I can kind of see that, actually, now that you point that out. Now, I feel like whenever you say that somebody looks like somebody else, there's like a group of people who are like militantly again, like, no, there's like no resemblance at all. Like, what are you saying? You know what I'm talking about?
I see the curvature and I've examined the eyelashes and I've devalued the comment and it's not acceptable.
Now, the Bortnyk's pawn structure on the queen side is also not acceptable. And yet, I think the compactness of his position somewhat compensates for the damaged pawn structure. I still think he's worse, though. And if he's not careful, you could just get, white could just disappear the entire queen side here in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, queen c7 is... The c7 pawn is actually... It doesn't look like it maybe right now. Queen a7 reminds you it's the glue. That holds literally the whole position together.
It does. And by the way, if you play rook ec8 and say, all hands on deck, you're actually blundering rook takes d6 and queen takes d6. How easy is that to blunder?
Yeah, seriously. Pawn is loose. There's tactics on d6. However, I feel like the engine is just not phased. Like, doesn't care about queen a7 at all. I'm in panic mode.
Well, rook takes c1 and queen d2 flashed in my mind initially, and then I realized you're blundering the other rook with check.
That's right.
So that's out of the question. Okay, he took on e1, but he goes rook b7.
Interesting.
Wait,
because what's going on?
Yeah, I was going to say, isn't there knight e4?
And there's no queen d2.
But there is queen e5 or queen e7, and black holds on by the skin of his teeth. I don't think that's sustainable, though. Like queen e7, even rook e3.
Yeah, I wanted to go queen d4 after queen e5 as like a way to play rook a7, strangely.
Ooh. Oh, and there's also the perpetual idea, queen d1 and queen h5.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So like rook e3, queen d4 actually makes a great impression.
Yeah, that's a really tricky defense. So maybe here, white's move should be some sort of... Yeah, well, other than rook e3, how else are you going to...
Can you take it?
Ensure that the knight can move?
How's that endgame? It's not good, right? I imagine knight takes d6. It's just ridiculous.
Let's pull up an analysis board. Take a look. Queen takes c1, king h2. I think black can just move the rook.
Yeah.
Like rook
excuse
before.
me. That's a good point.
You're excused. But that's what you got to try in these types of positions, right? I mean, you got to leave no stone unturned when there are this many pieces that are all kind of hanging.
Yeah.
So rook e3, I think queen d4 is the saving grace. So you've redeemed yourself by finding this move.
Okay. Whew. Got one. Got one right.
You were close there to getting kicked out of the commentary booth. But now that you found this perpetual... Yeah, what is the move? It's like +3? But
yeah, I actually have no idea.
Queen d8, I thought, runs into bishop f5.
Because what we're starting to see... Oh, bishop f5, knight g5.
Oh, knight g5?
Yeah.
Oh!
Uh-huh.
Queen d8. Oh, and bishop takes c6. And talk about the glue him on. If you slide the rook up, you lose c7. We know what happens when you lose c7. You lose the whole game.
Wow. Yeah, queen d8 is this great move, and it's been played on the board.
Oh.
Jeffrey went into the tank there and came up with queen d8. Bortnyk does not look happy to see that move.
No, he does not. And you want to hear something crazy? This is a really cool detail. Now, anytime black tries to give the same perpetual, white is going to have queen to h4. So that is another positive byproduct of the move queen d8. Maybe bishop e8 is the best defense, but now in comes the f pawn, f4, queen d4 check, king h2, and look, just black's entire position
the
just
geometry
evaporates here. It's beautiful. You can't move the knight, you can't move the bishop. The rook is stuck in molasses. This one is completely winning for white.
You know, it's so rare for, let's say, the opposing player to have their queen on your back rank, and then you still have rooks on the board that are not on your back rank. Like, you're on rook on b7. It's like, wait a minute, whose house is this? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Here?
No, home invasion is happening, and the white queen, just on its own, is holding off black's entire army of rook and minor pieces. I don't see a single way for Alexander Bortnyk to avoid just mass loss of life and gnashing of teeth here.
Yeah, we've looked at we've looked at almost every bishop move, and they've all lost. Like bishop e8, bishop e6, bishop f5. I mean, bishop g4, I guess, is the last one. I mean, you can still play bishop c6.
Still bishop c6, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's over. Not to mention, of course, that he's got now a minute and 45. He goes rook b4. But these situations are when
C4.
Alexander Bortnyk has pulled off crazy comebacks.
Yeah. Yeah. I look at the rook on
before.
b4, and I'm like, I just want to play c4 here.
Oh, yeah, totally.
It just feels good.
Shut that thing out. And great minds think alike.
Yeah, that's a really unpleasant move as black. Because let's say you play rook b4. In order for him to even play that move, he probably had to calculate so many things, like just to justify it. And then his opponent, calm, cool, collected, doesn't care, spends 4 seconds, c4. Let's just end all that.
Unbelievably tilting. And now Bortnyk down to 90 seconds. Lados Lounge was asking what happens after knight takes c4. Well, the problem here is that white grabs... Sorry. White grabs the bishop on d7. That is the problem. Queen f4, 1-0-1. And you're basically just losing all of your pieces. Bishop takes c6, queen takes f7. Just general societal collapse here happening among black's ranks. Oh, and knight f6. Whoop! So you can't even extricate your knight from
great little sound effect there, Daniel.
That was a perfect one. You know, I've started to judge my own whoops. That one was like an A+.
It sounded really, really... It's kind of like when you high-five someone and it just comes out so crisp.
Oh, yeah, I know that. Or a snap.
Yeah.
I can't snap, but when people who can snap, snap.
Right.
Okay, queen takes c7. Queen c7,
okay,
knight c4.
Right, because previously with the rook on b7, we were looking at bishop c6 here. But now bishop c6 at least doesn't hit the rook, which is kind of an achievement for black.
Yeah, Bortnyk is somehow rearranging his pieces in such a way that making them very difficult to actually bring down. What if you go a3? I guess the rook drops back to b7 then.
Because then bishop c6, rook b3.
Yeah, exactly. Crazy. Because you move the c pawn and now you move the a pawn, and suddenly the b pawn, the least likely to be weak, ends up being captured. Crazy. Hikaru has one, by the way, just to make sure.
Okay, yeah, so he's ahead in that match now, 2-1. Must-win final rapid game for Rodrigo, but we'll stick here for the moment. This looks like a really crucial moment here for Jeffrey. It feels like there's like maybe 1 or 2 final nails to put in the coffin, so to speak. And if he finds them, Bortnyk's in real trouble. But talk about resilience, talk about defensive ability. Bortnyk has somehow, I mean, I felt like I looked at every single move on the board and they all look lost. And somehow he's created a situation where I don't see the breakthrough.
And he's making it look easy with 45 seconds on the clock. I think Alexander Bortnyk is maybe like one of 3 players, and he's in pretty good company. Hikaru Nakamura. I mean, I would probably put like Magnus in that category, who can literally just come out of any situation alive. Doesn't matter how much time they have on the clock. Doesn't matter how lost they are. They're always going to make it difficult for you. And upon further reflection, Amon, I think the most sort of, the executive decision here should be queen takes c7, trade queens, and go knight c5, and basically vacuum up all of Black's pawns. This, I think, is the simplest way to win.
But it's just so interesting because when an engine evaluates something, it could say +3. But their +3, in some lines, it means you're up a piece. In other lines, the position is just so bad that it's +3. But for a human, I'll take this +3 as Black versus down a piece +3. So when you're calculating as Jeffrey, I don't think you're evaluating those two things as identical. You're thinking, oh, wait, I must be missing something. This feels totally winning, and all I'm getting is an endgame where maybe I'm going to win a pawn. But you're pointing out that's exactly what he should be transitioning to.
No, you're exactly right. And there's these mental blocks you have to overcome. Jeffrey Zhang just overcame them.
Yeah, that's super impressive. Just to understand that, hey, my opponent has wiggled out of this. It does work, but I'm still going to be able to end up on top in the endgame. And yeah, this is a dominant endgame for Jeffrey. Let's see if he can. Well, it would be a crazy comeback, right? Down 1-0, now putting himself in a position to actually win this match.
The funny thing is that material is currently equal. Currently. And the eval bar is giving over +5 in White's favor.
That's insane.
It is honestly insane. And if you're struggling to understand why, just the point is that Black is going to lose at the very least 2 pawns, and probably also the a5 pawn. So, in the short term, in the next 3 moves, it's hard to understand why it's so winning. But look at the long run. White is going to vacuum up all of the pawns, and barring a miracle, barring Black somehow coordinating the rook and knight to create counterplay, this one should be basically in the bag for Jeffrey. He's also got 3 minutes. Excellent time management throughout this match, by the way, by Jeffrey Zhang.
Yeah, I mean, you said, look, if you're struggling to understand why, immediately I was listening. I was like, yep, that's me. I'm struggling to understand why this is +5. But you pointed out every pawn is falling, and if you look at the coordination, rook on b4, knight on f6, where can you put those 2 pieces so that they actually, pose some threat to White's king? And I can't even find an arrangement. The f3 and g3 and g2 pawns are just perfect.
No, they're great. They're like a bumper on a car. You can get it to a fender bender, won't damage the body of the vehicle. That f3 pawn, Robert Hess would be pointing out that a pawn and a knight on the same file, 2 squares between them, the worst possible arrangement for the knight. It's like a spike when they used to bury vampires. They'd put spikes around the grave, right? You'd get impaled when you rose from the grave. That's what this reminds me of.
That's exactly
that on the History Channel.
When they designed chess, they had that in mind, Daniel.
They totally had that in mind. In fact, Dracula participated. Vlad the Impaler participated in the design of chess. But speaking of which, Jeffrey moves that pawn. I don't know about that, Amon. I thought if it ain't broke, you shouldn't fix it. Maybe
I was not trying to move my my pawn to f5. The one thing, weirdly, is that if you move the knight, there follows bishop e8 to g6. It's kind of nasty. You're going for mate, but then White gets this coffin.
Yeah, you can't do it, but I can. Rook takes a5. Jeffrey is just vacuuming up all the pawns. He's like, I don't care. It's like that scene in Groundhog Day where he's eating all these donuts and the day resets. And she asks him, Are you not worried about cholesterol at all? Nope. Jeffrey just collecting all the pawns. And the king is perfectly safe. This should be pretty easy, nonetheless.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about pawn on f3, covering the 2 squares for the knight. I'll take a bishop instead, covering not just g4 and e4, but also h5, d5, even further. Whether it's on c6 or f3, the knight on g5 has absolutely nowhere to go.
God, Bortnyk can't even get the smallest victory, man. He can't even get his king to just let me get this. Nope.
No, nothing.
King comes to g5.
Bishop
there
h5
goes another pawn.
Definitely the most surgical way to do this.
Stalemate ideas, by the way. Bishop g6, king h6. I can guarantee you that that's what Bortnyk is aiming for.
Bishop back to f3 is just punishing. There's nothing here. It's amazing how he's just got no counterplay.
It is. It's amazing to watch 2700s convert positions. It's honestly so satisfying. And just look at this, F6.
Yeah, the face that Bortnyk has, and keep in mind that we just praised, and for good reason, Bortnyk for being one of the best defenders like in the world, and how he always comes out with something. And he's just sitting there with his hand on his face because he just can't move.
In basketball, good offense beats good defense. You could contest a shot, but if Steph Curry makes a 35-footer, then he makes a 35-footer. It's the same thing here. Jeffrey Zhang has left Alexander Bortnyk with just no chances. He has tried to spark every fire that he possibly could, but the final position is going to speak for itself. Where is that knight going to end up?
E6?
On E8.
Yeah. Ugh.
Rook F7 coming. Actually, Black's rook has nowhere to turn.
Yeah, it's pretty
gets picked off.
Pretty sad, honestly.
Whoa, and Caruana in the meantime. I thought that the game was going to last for a long time, but he has already managed to win as we switch back to that game.
That's incredible, honestly. I also thought that game would last for a while. I guess strategically it kind of did. It was going to be a long game, but Fabi made sure that he didn't close off every avenue.
Yeah, he still has that H file. He doubled his rooks, and Kravtsev just didn't have enough beef to put on the file, but H4 really accelerated defeat. H takes G3, rook takes G3 is checkmate, ladies and gentlemen.
Right.
It's such a difficult situation for Martin Kravtsev. Could have been up 2 points, now finds himself down 1, as does Rodrigo Vasquez, as does Alexander Bortnyk. So a turn for the worse, Aman, for the lower seeds. They have their work cut out for him. They're going to have to force Armageddon by winning the final game on demand. Who will be capable of that? We will see. There's only one way to find out. But first, a short break as we prepare for the final game of the final set of matches here at the round of 64, the Chess.com Global Championship. Go absolutely nowhere. You will not want to miss the fourth and final game of these fascinating matches. We'll be right back.
open to anyone, all around the world. The Chess.com Global Championship offers the dream of playing against the best.
Whoa!
And hey, have we mentioned there's also $1 million at stake?
The total pot is $1 million.
No, that is not a typo. The prizes are unbelievably generous.
We began with thousands of players. Now only dozens remain.
It's over.
Wow. Ray Robson, he chuckles. He's not happy, but he respects the legend of Ivanchuk, and that legend continues.
The CGC knockout phase has arrived. There are those who played their way in, and some are here thanks to their well-earned reputations. No matter who you are, things are about to get very, very real.
Queen G8 check. Queen G8?
Queen G8,
oh
Queen
my God!
C8.
Oh my God!
A trip to the CGC finals and a clean shot at the largest first place prize of the year. My friends, it's the CGC round of 64. Who will take the next step to Toronto?
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Chess.com Global Championship. We are observing the final matches here at the round of 64. At the end of this final game, there will be 32 players remaining, and the prizes that they will be contesting are absolutely mouthwatering. Grandmaster Amon Hamilton, I think these numbers, they speak for themselves, don't they?
They do. I think anywhere that you're going to find $1 million in prizes, you're going to find the best players in the world competing for them. The champion you can see there taking home $200,000, and of course the largest first place prize in pro chess this year, Dania. So very exciting that we have such a strong field, but for obvious reason, this is a prestigious global championship, and there's tons of prizes at stake.
Indeed, and well, Hikaru Nakamura has his eyes on only one of the prizes, and that is $200,000. And in order to unlock the opportunity for that prize, he has to start by winning his first match against Rodrigo Vasquez, who has given him, regardless of the final game, a major run for his money. But now Vasquez, with his back against the wall, must win the final game of the white pieces to force Armageddon. And he starts off with another pretty tame opening, the same one that brought him a successful position in game 2. But once again, I think Hikaru is going to go for something a little bit more mainstream this time.
Yep, you called it, I think, in our last game when we were talking about how Hikaru adjusts. One of the best players. He's not too stubborn about his openings. It's not like he can only play one opening, and then if he gets a bad position in it, he keeps repeating it. No, if he sees something he doesn't like, plays something, doesn't really enjoy the position that he gets, doesn't feel like he has winning chances, I mean, the next time he plays that color, he's just going to switch the opening, and that's exactly what he's done. D5. Key difference from the last game where that pawn was on d6, and even though that game was a draw, I think Hikaru was like, no, I don't want to play that position anymore. Rodrigo is sort of going for this Zukertort kind of idea, maybe with b3, bishop b2, and I think Hikaru is more happy to have the pawn on d5 and just instead of the pawn on d6, he's actually competing for the space in the center.
Yeah, I mean, what Vasquez is playing is sort of the London before the London. This is what people used to play before they realized that you could park the bishop on f4. And I think it's one of the most underrated openings in chess because it's not very theoretical.
Yeah.
You basically play a bunch of moves really quickly, the same ones every time. And if Black is not careful, if Black just sort of develops in a pedestrian fashion, very often you see White putting the bishop on b2, knight on e5, much like the London. And the checkmate on the king side could come as quickly as like move 15. You see White lifting the rook and sacking on h7. How many games like that have we seen, even with strong players getting victimized like that on the Black side? So Hikaru, he's spending time for a very good reason.
Interesting. Ooh. Bishop b4.
What does he want?
Well, the thing is, queen a5, if a3, he wants bishop c3 and queen c7? I can only imagine.
Knight e4. Very ambitious opening approach by Hikaru. Clearly aiming for the c3 square. No, he trades the knights.
I was going to say, trying to jump into that c3 square too early is a little bit little bit difficult. I think black is happy to have traded a pair of knights in this position. If I think of, do I want a knight thrown on the f6 square and thrown on the d2 square here as black? My answer is no. So I think I'm happier to have this. If white wants to play knight e5 now, black's happy to take that. And after pawn takes back on e5, there's no knight on f6 that gets dislodged, right? I feel like this is an achievement for Hikaru, or at least that's why he played it, knight e4. He wanted to trade those knights and then continue.
Yeah, he made a significant tempo investment in order to trade knights, but I agree with you. I think it's worth it. I think he's largely taken the sting out of any kingside operation that white can put forward. And you can see Hikaru just continues to play in a very unconcerned fashion. He grabs more space on the queen side. Eventually, the dark squared bishop is going to move back to d6. It can be compelled to move there with a3. And then Hikaru's placement of the pawn on a5 really justifies itself, because anytime that white plays c4, Amon, you can respond with a sort of automatic a4, trying to induce more weaknesses on the queen side. Maybe not exactly like this, but I think you get the point.
Yep, and I am definitely surprised by the move a4. Not a terrible move, but surprising, because, I mean, look at that c3 square. If white doesn't play c4 soon, black will just play queen c7, rook c8, and bishop c3. So I don't think that can be permitted at all. So I think, are we going to see the move either c3 or c4 by white?
I don't see an alternative. I think you have to stir things up in the center, for better or worse. It is liberating that white is in a must-win situation, because it really doesn't give you much of a choice. You're going to have to push the c-pawn very, very soon.
Yep. Queen e3. I mean, if you want to enjoy a tactic or two, rook c8, c3, bishop takes c3, and it looks like, you're the one who's blundered, but haha.
Gift me the pawn.
Yeah. So that's kind of one idea of queen e3. The other thing I noticed as soon as queen e3 was played was that black has the option of playing bishop a6. I don't know if it's fantastic right away, but if you could trade off those bishops, I feel like you'd be happy to do so.
Yeah, positionally, no question about it, because white is left with this bishop that's sort of biting on gray. Now, Zuckertor players have kind of a love-hate relationship with this bishop, much like the King's Indian bishop on g7. But the fact remains, I think Hikaru has largely solved his opening problems. And since he has done so, I think it is a great time to watch the start of our other two games. Okay, let's start, as has been our tradition, with the Jeffrey Zhang versus Alexander Bortnyk game, in which Bortnyk now finds himself in a must-win situation. Here we go.
Same opening as well. So a lot of repetition here. Trying to remember exactly what happened last time, but it really turned out well for Jeffrey, if we remember. He had a tremendous game. c6, b5, a5. But the knights were still on the board, if I recall.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. After knight d4, I think they had this position, and Bortnyk went bishop a4. That's how his bishop got in trouble. This time, he deviates by trading on the spot and getting his bishop out to g5 and tucking the other bishop away, not on a4, but on c4. Maybe I'm jumping the gun, but I do like this more. Well, I would basically like anything more than what he did in the previous game.
Yeah.
What do you make of this?
I think he's definitely done the same thing as Jeffrey, is what I believe. Like, Jeffrey looked at the opening from last game, probably during the slight break between games, as you should, some preparation. It looked like he might have improved his line. I think the same thing has happened with Bortnyk here.
Yeah, no, that you clearly get the sense that he's played the moves quickly. If Bortnyk is playing quickly in any position, it's basically because either he has 5 seconds on the clock or it's opening preparation. One or the other.
Yep. No, it's honestly true.
But if I'm honest, let's say Jeffrey plays the typical move d6.
Yep.
Okay, he's played h6, bishop h4. Now he's played d6. He's kind of ready to play g5 and shut down the dark squared bishop. I'm just not entirely enthralled with white's winning chances in a position like this. It seems pretty symmetrical. Black is just so darn solid in these anti-Berlin positions.
Yeah, like queen f3 to maybe put some pressure on that knight, you're pointing out, there are some nasty things that can happen. So G5, Bishop G3, and I swear I've seen this exact thing in Puzzle Rush.
Oh, 100 times too. And there's like different variations of it. Sometimes you can even go Bishop G4. There's a classic trick where in this position you go Queen D7. Now, in this case, of course, White has the G3 square, but the placement of the queen on F3 in almost all 1E4, E5 openings is associated with a lot of risk.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good trap to just be aware of.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, I'm saying that trap that we just looked at is a good one to be aware of, because I was thinking, okay, Queen F3, super logical. Put pressure on the F6 knight, and we all know when the pawn moves to G5, the instinct when you see G7, G5 is, oh, that's a weakness around the king. But not always. And in this particular position, I think we might even see Jeffrey play the move G5 voluntarily. So that's how strong
I've discovered in doing the speedrun that people have a E5 players at sort of the club player level have a pathological fear of making this move.
Yeah.
But you have to understand that the king isn't just automatically checkmated because you've pushed the pawn from G7 to G5. It's harder than that to deliver checkmate. And I'm on the same page. I think we're very likely to see G5. And as we wait for the middle game to unfold in this game, a good time to check into our final game, where Martin Kravtsov finds himself in the same situation as Bortnyk. He's got the white pieces, but he is in a must-win situation, and I don't think that he's moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
I think he's tilted. He's got over 15 minutes, and this doesn't look like preparation.
If it does, it looks like preparation that wouldn't take that long to make. Because, in Queen B3, you're offering a trade. The rook doesn't look great on B3. It's not like it's very well placed. And talk about things being simplified, material being equal. No, if you're Fabi here, I think you're feeling very confident that you're going to draw this game and thus win the match.
Yeah, the question I have here is, why not queen takes b3, rook takes b3, and rook f8? Are you really going to lose this position? I agree that White probably has a tiny pull here, because I guess these pawns are potential targets for White's rooks. But the rook is getting into c2. Like,
how bad can it be?
How bad can it be? Exactly. With such a bishop on g7, pressure on b2.
Mm-hmm.
I think Fabi is just double checking, but my guess is that he's going to trade queens and go rook c8.
Yeah, strangely enough, I think the move queen a6 is attractive in a way, because you could make the case that the rook on b5 it can't really swing laterally very easily. Rook a1 is not possible, and you'll just do the exact same thing with rook c8, rook f to c8 anyway. So I'm sure he was giving some consideration.
But he knows who to listen to.
Yeah, exactly. He ultimately was like, I know that there's going to be at least a division between two commentators, and ultimately Dania will be on my side for a queen trade, which is fully ironic.
You also made an unintentional pun, or maybe it was intentional, when you said a case could be made for queen a6. Martin Kravtsov Chess.com account name handle is Cayse. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but
I actually don't think I knew that. I see that username all the time. Title Tuesday is like winning all these games, but there you go. That's news for me. Strong player, very strong player.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that in case you didn't know.
Oh, thank you.
I was really beating a dead horse there. H5 by Fabiano Caruana. So he sort of keeps the status quo. I think he's basically saying, I'm going to keep my rooks connected on the 8th rank to avoid shenanigans connected to bishop takes or rook takes b6.
Makes sense. Rook down to c2. Now b2 is protected, so things are a little bit different. White's kind of intending bishop d6, bishop a7. If you go rook c2, the king could make it up to f3 really easily. White definitely has a way to expand this position, so I will definitely say I think this is not a position that Fabi will lose, but I gotta say, I probably didn't give Kravtsov enough credit for this one.
No, he's gonna try. He's gotten himself the kind of position where there is no way to secure an immediate draw. The game's gonna continue, but a game that is very likely not to continue, and this is bad news for people who are hoping for a historic upset. It does seem that Hikaru Nakamura as we switch to his game, is going to hold his own against Castor.
Let's make a draw.
I mean, look at this position. It's +2 for black. Oh, bishop a6 is unstoppable. You're going to lose the exchange. You can move the queen, but the rook is still going to be trapped.
Wow. And so,
look at Hikaru.
Yeah, he's got that demeanor about him where it's like, you can resign now. Like,
yeah,
we're done here.
He's got the Shable face.
Oh yeah, the nods are coming in. And the thing about black's position, I didn't even notice bishop a6. I was just looking at the position, and I was like, okay, queen d5, rook c8, sure,
I feel like Tigran Petrosian probably would see bishop a6 and still not play it, just because the bishop is so beautiful.
Yeah, honestly, it crossed my mind.
No, it's totally fair. I think you were never going to lose if you put the queen on d5. But with his last move, if that's what Hikaru wanted to do, he would have played it in this position. Yep. Can't really blame him for wanting to win the exchange either. And then he's still going to put the queen on d5.
Correct. Any queen trade will
over.
Be game over. So Hikaru looks like he's going to do it in resounding fashion as well. He's not just going to draw his way, but what could have been maybe a 1-0 lead for Rodrigo in that first game might end up as like a 3-1 favorite victory, where, if you didn't see how the match was actually played out with us here live, you might look at that score and say, oh yeah, okay, Hikaru coasted to victory, but it feels like it was far from the case.
No, totally. In fact, if we don't have a single upset, that would be the most misleading day ever, because we were close to having 3 upsets. Yep. Now we're on the cusp of having 0. Crazy how these matches just turn at the drop of a hat. 1 second, you're calling for the greatest upset in CGC history. The next, all of the top seeds just seem to wipe the floor. But this one is all over. We can leave Hikaru to it, and we can look at the more combative games. Let's come back to the Jeffrey Zhang position, because we've had quite a few transformations in the Zhang Bortnyk game.
Right.
Okay, and as we make our way to that position, bad news. I'm on bad news indeed for Mr. Bortnyk, if I'm having the right read on the position.
Yeah, knight g1 never feels great. I guess the other thing about this is Jeffrey has just done a tremendous job neutralizing Bortnyk with the white pieces. Not even neutralizing, but just outplaying him with black. Bortnyk did do the same thing, honestly, in his opening early on in the match, but I think Jeffrey has just recovered and has shown so much resilience in how he recovered from that early result in Bortnyk's favor.
Yeah, Jeffrey is basically untiltable. He is a consummate professional.
Yeah.
It always struck me watching Jeffrey at tournaments, just how, first of all, how classy he is. We're all fans of Jeffrey here, amazing commentator. But, at the U.S. Championship and the last U.S. Championship, Jeffrey had a very rough start. I think he went 0-4. But when I managed to beat him in round 2, he offered to analyze the game. He was totally super friendly, super nice. It's so refreshing. I will fully admit that, I don't do that. When I lose a game, I'm often not in the mood to analyze, and I can definitely be a little bit pissy. But Jeffrey just made such a great impression on me, because I think chess players really are, the personality shines through in those tough moments when you lose, and Jeffrey's just awesome.
Yeah, no, that's honestly deserved summary of pretty much Jeffrey in a nutshell there. King h7, and while he's this great, nice, awesome guy, I mean, he's still going to play moves like King h7 and Rook g8 and look to checkmate you, all right?
Yeah. Let's make no mistake. He is the baby-faced assassin. That is the nickname for Steph Curry. People in chat were getting annoyed at how many times I mentioned Steph Curry on a broadcast, and on a podcast. But that's precisely why I'm going to mention him a few more times. They don't know how I work them on.
No. Once you know that people are bothered by something, now you know what to include in every show.
Twist that knife. Queen h5, Bortnyk trying to twist the knife on the king side. The one annoying thing for Jeffrey here, Amon, is that you can't go queen g6 because you drop e5, and you can't go rook g8. Okay, maybe you can, but here you drop f7. So he has to solve the problem of these 2 pawns on e5 and f7. How is he going to go about that?
Yeah, queen g5, also similar. Bishop takes on f7. So maybe is it just something slower? Also knight f3 is happening, and that e-pawn becomes a target. I was thinking you could just go slow. Bishop d7, rook d8, but now I'm thinking with the knight coming in to f3, I'm not sure how much time you have.
Yeah, I think the eval bar could be a little bit misleading here. Perhaps you can drop the queen back, and after knight f3, play f6, but now you have created a complex of light square weaknesses on the king side,
Yeah.
which white cannot exploit with knight h4 because this traps the queen. Man, this queen is just having a bad day. But maybe something like rook ad1, and it's definitely a double-edged position. We've got a nice chat message from Stranso, too. My fondest memory here is getting to play Jeffrey on a casual stream. He even let me get a winning position before destroying me. Nice remembrance there. I like the way Bortnyk has handled the last couple moves.
Memories of Jeffrey.
Yeah, exactly. they end with, and then Jeffrey like wiped me off the board.
Exactly. I liked your queen g7 suggestion because it also brings bishop g4 to the table. And you get this weird idea, queen g7, bishop g4, bishop d8 after queen h4.
So can you say that line again?
So queen g7, like your move. And then, okay, just like pawn a4 just to show black's kind of threatening, like bishop g4, bishop d8. Like...
God, the queen has gotten trapped on f3, h5, and h4. Isn't that
Talk
crazy?
About a bad day.
Yeah, just keeps getting worse.
So yeah, that came to mind.
And Jeffrey, I think we're not wrong because Jeffrey has spent a solid couple of minutes here. Queen g7 is on the board. And Bortnyk, he's listened to us. There's that h3 move.
Yeah, he wasn't having any shenanigans. It's like, okay, if I even sniff that the queen could be trapped, let's just end all those calculations. h3, taking control of g4, rook g8, you might think you have checkmate, but queen takes f7, pins the queen to the king.
That's actually super critical. There's no other way to defend.
Yeah.
So Jeffrey's going to have to invest another valuable tempo in solving the problem of the f7 pawn. But like we said previously, that's not easy to do without making more weaknesses on the king side. Could consider f5, but again, maybe white drops the bishop back to d3 there and goes after the light squares. So I'm going to take back what I said earlier. I was already starting to shovel dirt on Bortnyk, but true to his reputation, Aman, he has managed to stir up some intrigue in this game.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be knight f3, knight h4, knight f5 ideas. You've also got rook d1. And you look at that bishop on c8, Danya, and it's like, okay, if you play bishop e6, I think white's generally happy to take. Gets rid of the bishop pair. And if you don't play bishop e6, there's nowhere else on that diagonal it can go except d7. So as soon as white plays rook ad1, I'm starting to be like, okay, wait a minute. How do I even develop this piece at all?
Yeah, let's start talking about equalizing. Well, there's the answer, bishop d7. Not, the sexiest possible square, and a case in point is that after rook ad1, rook ad8,
that was a good one as well. Yeah. The queen?
Yeah, queen g5. I'm gonna let people fill in the blank there, figure out where the queen actually belonged.
Your whoops are getting a lot of power behind the whoops today.
I'm perfecting them, Keep improving as a commentator.
Bishop e8? Is that our idea? Like rook d1, bishop back to e8, and then like f6.
Our idea. I'm not taking ownership of that idea.
I think it's a good idea. You might want to get in as an angel investor.
Okay, I agree. I'm going to give you some seed money.
Yeah, bishop.
Yeah, king h8, f6, and bishop g6. No, I think Jeffrey actually has put the time that he invested to good use. And as Bortnyk considers how to deal with that, let's switch back to Hikaru's game just to make sure that we catch the end of that match. And we still have a position with white being down in exchange. I think a draw for Aman is often what decides positions like these. Because at some point, the player who needs to win just realizes that they have exactly zero chances.
So let's use this position as the example. Would you accept a draw offer as white?
Yes. At this point, I would. Against someone like Hikaru especially.
Yeah. It's just like, it's gotten to the point where you know how the match has gone. You know which positions your opponent's comfortable in. I mean, first of all, I don't think Hikaru is offering
not
any
accepting.
draws. I mean, he's not accepting, but he's also not offering. And I honestly, I think I would probably accept, but I'm not sure I would offer unless it was very, very clear. And this position is pretty clear.
Okay, I think Hikaru has seen the light. I remember in the playoffs of the Millionaire Chess tournament in Las Vegas, I had a situation where I needed to win to qualify to the Final Four. My opponent needed a draw in the rapid tiebreak game. I had a lost position, so I basically extended my hand and I was like, all right, draw. And he declined it. And during the game, I got really like flustered. I was like, you qualify if you accept this draw. He ended up beating me.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Hikaru takes the prudent decision. He draws the game. He wins the match and gets into the round of 32. Amon, it was not easy.
No.
Hats off to Vasquez.
Really, I mean, 2.5 to 1.5 does actually paint the picture of how this match was, at least from my perspective here, commentating with you. And I think everyone watching can appreciate that Hikaru did not have an easy road here. Vasquez in the first two games was neck and neck, if not pushing for more. And Hikaru really adjusted well. When he got the white pieces a second time, he made use of them. And I thought he just showed a tremendous ability to adjust on the fly and change his openings, play more main lines. And ultimately, I think that was what got him this match win.
Agree completely. That was a great summary. And since this match has concluded, I think we should shift to the Caruana game, which we haven't looked at in a while. Not all that much has changed in the Caruana game. Well, it's still a slightly better endgame for white. Kravtsov has this pawn on b5 that's fixing black's pawn chain on the queen side. But can white actually make anything of that, right? You can say that you have this pawn until tomorrow morning, but
that's
how
true.
do you win this position?
And I tell you, I know it's not the fastest plan ever executed, but king e8, king d7, king c8, king b7, a6. Like,
a6 at the end, yeah.
Like, I could just, and then suddenly I have an outside pass pawn. I might even get optimistic.
Outside pass pawn?
You know, it's just outside.
Yeah, it's as opposed to an inside pass pawn.
I hate those. You know, when they're faster as well. The e pawn and the d pawn, they have the inside track.
That's right.
They queen in 7 moves.
The tilting thing about playing white here is that your king is so far away from the action. It's like the nearest nightclub is 50 miles away. Like you are not even getting to, d2 by the time the black's king is already on b7. How do you put up with this plan?
Right.
Now, you could put a rook on a6, but the secondary issue, Amon, of black getting the king to b7 is that even if you don't get a chance to push your a pawn, you free up the rook. And if the rook gets to d5, you could end up losing this pawn in a heartbeat. It becomes, it goes from a strength to a weakness, at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, exactly. You move the rook from a2, suddenly a6 can be played. You leave it there, then black can execute this plan. Meanwhile, I always start to pay attention to the pawns and what colors are starting to get fixed on, especially with the bishops. And black's pawns look very, very, very good on light squares, considering we have dark square bishops in play.
Yep. And here comes the king. Fabio's just closing his eyes and getting the king to b7.
Yep.
Nothing more infuriating than a situation where your opponent's plan is so obvious that even my cat could do it.
Yeah, and you're sitting there, okay, great, I know what you're going to do, but you also can't stop it, and you don't know how to react to it. So it's like, might be obvious, but it's good.
I think Martin is trying to stop it, but after king c8, I'm not sure exactly what he has in mind. If he goes rook e4, that's easy to defend against. If he goes rook d4, let's play the moves on the board. King c8, f5. Let's say I just keep parroting the plan.
So I don't know, takes and like rook e4, rook e6.
Yeah, maybe something like this. And okay, double-edged position, yeah. And that's the best that you can do is get a double-edged position. So
yeah.
Rook e6, rook e6. Black's going to go a5. But I agree. At least in a situation like this, you're up a pawn. You can go after the h-pawn, and it's anybody's game.
Yeah. And look, I'm the kind of player, I don't know if everyone's like this. I'm the kind of player that if I'm in a match and I have to win the game, I will take some risks and risk losing the game because, I mean, what's the difference if it's 3-1?
Yeah.
This is the Chess.com Global Championship. Like, this is a knockout. You may as well leave it all on the table here.
I think in the World Cup, which is the sort of most prominent knockout tournament, rating considerations do play a role. Like sometimes you don't just want to lose a game. especially if a lower rated guy is playing a higher rated guy, you often see the higher rateds be a little bit more reluctant to give up, a quick draw in the second game, for example. Here, there's no rating on the line. So,
yeah,
there's absolutely no reason to pull any punches, to hold back
for sure
anything if you're on the side that needs to win to stay in the match.
And we just saw saw Hikaru take a draw to win the match, right? It's like not like there's any rating considerations. Obviously, may as well just you've earned it at that point, and both players can agree that's a fair result. So we do have an attempt here by Martin. I think that's the way to do it. You're down a point. I love it. F5, rook h4. He's imbalancing the position. He's saying you can get a pass pawn on the b file as black. White's going to get one on the h file.
I love what Fabi just did here. Flexible approach to this position. There's no longer any need to move the king to b7, right? The point of that was to prepare a5. But now White's rook is on the other side of the world. It's in Karth. So you can play a5 without the services of your king. And instead, he repurposes the king as a defender. Love it.
Yeah, this is great because now you can just play a6. You don't need the king there. The rook's not on the a file anymore for White. So a6, Black's going to take it, start pushing that b pawn. So I think we'll probably see that right now.
Maybe a6, rook a4. Is there a case to be made for that?
That it's actually, good for White to have.
I think it might be.
Yeah.
I think it might be. Maybe I'm crazy, but something like this, maybe rook c4, maybe you start pushing the h-pawn. I feel like White's got a shot here.
Yeah, rook c4, rook c6. Yeah. And as White, you're probably happy just to have more imbalances. So if you're going to do something like this, maybe a5 just first.
Yeah, saving a tempo.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's exactly what Fabi is trying to decide. A6 or a5. But I don't think a5 has any downsides, as you're saying.
Right.
Because it forces White to. Because a5 threatens a4.
Exactly. And if that happens, it's too much. So White needs to take or play rook a4.
He took en passant automatically. Okay, so this is his idea. He wants to limit the mobility of the pawn. That way, still some chances for White. No question about it. h4 is coming. If I had to pick a side, I would be picking White any day of the week.
Yeah, rook b5. Next will be really annoying. So I think it's important that Black actually moves the king now. Because if you imagine that White's rook is already on b5, isn't Black stuck? The king can't move any closer to the b pawn because the f5 pawn, and the rook can't move from a6 because of the b pawn, and neither can the bishop.
Right.
So it's weird, but I think you need to move the king so that you can meet rook b5 with an e6, for example.
Great minds think alike. King f6 is on the board. The other thing you could do is to meet rook b5 with rook a5, if need be, to dislodge the rook, because any rook trade,
right?
I think, Aman, unless I'm misunderstanding the position, any rook trade is going to be in Black's favor. It's basically going to result in an insta draw.
100%. Yeah, rook a5 is a great resource as well.
Yeah, of course, Fabi should not lose this game. I mean, if he can keep the b6 pawn alive, if he can prevent White's h-pawn from reaching h7, I think Black is solid enough here to make that on-demand draw here and carry the match.
Yeah, not without trying, though, Kravsip. But now, okay, the rook gets to b7, right? And after rook b7, b5, and the pawn gets to stay on a light square. And how great is this?
Well,
right?
I think Kravsip's going to play rook b5 in response to rook b7. And then finally start pushing the h-pawn. I think you have to go rook b5, and he does.
Right.
But Fabi just says, congratulations. You're blockading my pawn. I'm blockading your h-pawn with my king.
Do you remember when we were talking about how you should just do nothing sometimes? I feel like Fabi is doing that right now, and it's a difficult thing to do. He's leaving his rook on b7, bishop d8, and he actually might just play bishop c7, bishop d8 or something.
Yeah. Now, he very well might, because the h-pawn is never going to get to h5 unless you recruit the services of your rook. But the moment you do that, Black's rook is perfectly positioned to guide the b-pawn forward.
Yeah.
Ooh. But Fabi, adventurous.
Yeah, that's one of those, I can do this moves, so watch me do it.
Exactly. And you can't take on b6, and you can't do anything about it. Haha.
Right. Also, not really threatening anything, but it's just the move.
So in the meantime, it seems like Fabi is on the way to making the draw. We should check into the Bortnyk game because that game is heating up. Bortnyk is in acute time pressure, and he needs to pull another rapid out of the hat. Let me refresh to get the current position. I think he's going down.
Yeah, that was a little disappointing. You refreshed, and the eval bar kind of went down there for white. But those bishops, plus obviously the extra pawn and rook d8 stops bishop d3, as if we needed any more reasons to like black's position. But bishop d3 is kind of the annoying move. It's been stopped. Great chances for Jeffrey.
Yeah, really the last hurrah here for Bortnyk, trying to encircle the king with his remaining pieces. Yeah. I wouldn't rule out c5 and bishop c6. White's king could be the one on the chopping block here. c5 is on the board.
That's a great move. c5, and it's amazing how this e-pawn just steps out of the way, right? Bishop c6, e4, e3, and just E3. Both bishops.
Oh, what a pretty line.
Maybe bishop b3 or something just to show it, because bishop b3 also intends bishop c2. But now I don't think there's any stopping this. And the checks from the bishops, and it's beautiful coordination.
And lest you forget, we have a rook on f8 that's also hanging, which can be picked up on demand the moment the knight drops back to f3. This one, I think, is essentially over. 14 seconds for Bortnyk. It doesn't have a single move here. He might have to take on e8. But if that's the best that he can do,
I think he
might as well resign the game. Yeah, I think he has to.
I think it's worth taking on e8 rather than resigning. Even though you're down a lot of material, there's still some light square possibilities. But Jeffrey just played this game tremendously.
It was never really in doubt. I mean, it was a great opening. Jeffrey took his time when he needed to take it, right? Queen g7, f6, finding a way to deploy his light squared bishop.
Yep.
And now all he needs to do is, avoid a catastrophic blunder. I think you can push the e-pawn to e3.
Right.
I don't see why not.
e4 check, and then king h1, pawn to e3, and you've actually got the exact same threat as before, but now the pawn's already there.
Yeah, and there's a very pretty line. I can show this real quick. As Jeffrey, by the way, taking his time like the professional that he is. White can try a last-ditch attempt. Bishop d3, rook takes. It looks like White's still stable, but in comes the e-pawn again.
Wow.
After rook takes e2, it's a ladder checkmate. You have the bishop that you need. It's controlling h2, and it's all over.
Mm-hmm.
e4 is on the board, and so is e3.
Yeah, it's so strong. And 4 seconds left. What can you possibly come up with except this exact
E2.
line?
And there it is. That is the final move of the game. What a beautiful pawn advance, Amon. The pawn going from e5 all the way to e2, and it's a mate on h3.
I love the decision. Rook ff8. Hey, if you mouse slip rook h3, I've got rook h8 mate. It's a good practical try, but honestly, start to finish, Daniel, I mean, this game was just the Jeffrey Zhang show. Even this match, after the first game, I was just so impressed how he came back and
it was phenomenal.
Showed the class.
Yeah, he never really gave Bortnyk any chances in the 3 games that he won. I mean, maybe in the second game, that weird blunder let Bortnyk back in the game, but he used the time effectively, and Fabiano Caruana is also about to put the finishing touches on his amazing comeback against Barton Kravtsev. This one, Amon, is probably going to go down in the books as the most heartbreaking match that we've seen thus far. The closest one to getting into an upset territory. Wow, Martin Kravtsev, he's going to have a tough pill to swallow for the next couple of days.
Yeah, he will. And you know what's actually ended up happening is I think all the favorites have won their matches, and boy, did it not look like that was going to happen.
Nope. I would bet, my family heirlooms that we would have at least one upset. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was like 1-0 in 2 of the matches. Hikaru was barely surviving in the first 2 games, and yet now it all seems smooth.
Exactly.
Okay, now barring a rook blunder, this is a draw.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, Fabi might win if you're not careful here.
Yeah, exactly.
That's one thing to push for a win or a result if you need it. But when you get in the territory like right now, where it's just sort of needless, and there's no way to actually make progress, then you're kind of just tossing away point.
Yeah, and if I'm Fabi, I'm basically staying on the e-file.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what he's doing. Rook back to e4. And this is all perfunctory moves. The result of the game is no longer in question.
Yeah, rook e4 back, king g6.
We've seen crazy things happen, but it tends to happen the least to players like Fabiano Caruana. I think f4 is possible here if you really want to force it.
True.
Okay, rook g4. It's only a question of when Martin Kraftev accepts the inevitable here.
f4 now.
Yep. Fabi has 2 minutes to calculate that highly complicated line.
Yeah. And
instead,
I'm not sure if that was
repetition.
I was going to say, yeah, I'm not sure that was an offer, but probably 3-time repetition. And Daniel, we have 3 results in the books. Quite impressive that we saw 3 comebacks. I still can't get over the fact that not a single underdog came away with even an Armageddon match, Daniel. These all finished in regulation.
It's absolutely crazy what we just saw. And Hikaru Nakamura, he won by the narrowest of margins, but that decision to adjust his opening strategy was an incredibly prescient one. In game 3, he went for a mainline Grunfeld. Vasquez wasn't comfortable with it, and Hikaru sails through to a crushing win in that game. Again, all credit to Rodrigo Vasquez for an excellent match. Bortnyk and Kraftev, they're going to be super disappointed. Amon, let's be real. Both of them stood to win their matches, but you know, they can be proud of the fight that they put up. There is a reason that people like Jeffrey and Fabiano are in the Super Grandmaster crowd as we look at the overall bracket. Round of 32 is set.
There it is. And finally, we have all names known for the next round. I'm already looking at, the next matchups. And of course, there are some streamer names that stand out to me as well, some fan favorites, as well as just some legends of the game, some older players, generational differences as well, Danya. So, man, so many exciting matches to look out for.
Kramnik Sarin and Wesley So against Vasily Ivanchuk. We've got 2 major generational matchups to come in the round of 32. Dominguez against Eric. Hikaru Nakamura faces a David Navarra who is playing well in the Chess.24 Rapid Tournament right now. He won his first round matchup. That ain't going to be easy either for Hikaru. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to have to mark out your calendars. You're going to have to skip some work days because you will not want to miss the rest of the CGC. Oh my God. Well, what to say, Amon?
Decompressing after what I thought was going to be a longer day. And look, I might have my players in the tournament that I want to see do well. I might be a little biased to see Eric go through, but look, I always want to see when I'm commentating an Armageddon game. I'm a fan of excitement, and we didn't get to see that today, but it was off the back of some really entertaining games. Blunders, I think I saw one of the craziest blunders that I've seen in the competition just because of the stakes at the time. It would have been 2-0 for the underdog against Fabiano, looking back to that full piece ahead position that Martin Kraftev had. So that moment is a highlight or low light, depending on which side you're looking at.
I think that was a great summary. I don't have much to add other than the fact that your CGC withdrawal will not last even 2 days because the round of 32 begins Wednesday, September 21st. That is this coming Wednesday, the day after tomorrow, at bright and early 4 a.m. Pacific, 7 in the morning Eastern Time, and 1 p.m. Central European Standard Time. We will be bringing you the round of 32 in all its glory and in all its force. You'll have to tune in to see who will stay in the tournament and contest a share of the $1 million prize fund. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, the day has come. The time has come, and the day has come for us to wrap up our coverage of the round of 64. Today was the last day. Wednesday marks the start of the round of 32. Grandmaster Amon Hamilton, always a true pleasure to commentate with you. This was so much fun. These 3 hours went by in a flash. So I'd like to thank you, Amon. I'd like to thank our producer, Pick, for another flawless broadcast. Everybody in the chat for supporting your favorite player and keeping the chat lively and entertaining. And our entire amazing team at Chess.com for the work they do, bringing us a high level and a flawless production day in and day out. And for now, I'm Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky alongside Grandmaster Amon Hamilton, telling you goodbye. Enjoy the rest of your day here from the CGC, the Chess.com Global Championship. We will see you on Wednesday for the round of 32.